over the last 2 days, and the witnesses have just accompanied me this morning on a site visit to Sunhoney and Christchurch Stone Circles to point out the various physical features at the monuments and the surroundings that they've been talking about in their evidence. So this morning is day 3 of the inquiry into the proposed Hill of Fair wind farm. My name's Tammy Swift-Adams, and I'm a reporter with the Scottish Government's Planning and Environmental Appeals Division. We're usually known as DPEA. I've been appointed by the Scottish Ministers to conduct this inquiry and prepare a report which will set out my findings and my recommendation. The DPEA reference number for this case is WIN-110-4. You can use that if you're looking up documents on the DPEA website or if you're looking for the recordings of these sessions on the DPEA webcast site. I just want to check people can hear me okay. Thank you. Was that a no? Not very well. Okay, well, I'll try and speak closer to the microphone. Is that a bit better? Okay. I can't always do that if I've got a document between me, but I'll try and remember. I'm not going to repeat all of the information that I've set out at the start of the inquiry, but there's just a few points to go to. So we're beginning today the second inquiry session, which is on landscape and visual impacts. The inquiry is being live streamed on the DPEA webcast site. A recording of each day's events will also be available to view there afterwards. By participating, by being here today, you're consenting to recording, storage and use of that material for the purposes of webcasting, training and keeping a record that's accessible by the public. Participants' microphones need to be switched off when you're speaking and switched on at other times. These microphones have 2 buttons. If you just use the one that's nearest to you, that'll both switch you on and switch you off. Please don't pick the microphones up by the stalks. If you need to move them, use the bases. Please make sure phones and other devices are on silent mode or turned off. The fire exits are to my right here and to the back of the room behind the front of the room behind the public seating. We're not expecting a fire alarm. The toilets are in the hallway and the ladies' toilets are upstairs. We're not using the kitchen. There should be some water out on the table towards the back. I've not checked that this morning, so I'll check that in the break. We'll take a lunch break and probably short breaks during the afternoon and the morning at appropriate times. And we intend to finish today by about 4 p.m, but we sometimes continue on up till about 5. And then we're resuming tomorrow at 10. So I'll take now the names of the people who are taking part in this session, and I'll go to you, Mr. Trinick, for the applicant first.
Thank you, ma'am, and good morning. My name is Marcus Trinick. I'm a solicitor of King's Counsel. Sitting to my right is Amy Howard, who instructs me. Sitting to her right is Gavin Shirley. Sitting to his right is Graham Kerr. And at the end is Pip de Klerk, who works with Amy Howard. And I call this morning my witness, Neil Ferber, who sits over there.
Thank you. And Mr. Finlay for the council, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. My name's James Finlay, King's Counsel. I have one witness for this session, Carol Anderson, who sits to my right, and I'm assisted by Mr. Ewan Brown, who sits to her right.
Thank you. And you've got Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Hewitt here too.
Absolutely, but they're just observing this session. They're not playing any part, which is why I haven't introduced them, not any discourtesy to them.
That's all right. I'm just getting the names of everybody around the table. Mr. Campbell, please, for Hothwig. Mr. Rogerson.
Good morning, ma'am. George Rogerson, a local hill user, hill walker and outdoor enthusiast.
And Mr. Wells.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. I'm Andrew Wells. I'm also a hill walker and a mountaineer, and I very much welcome the opportunity to be able to give evidence to the inquiry in due course.
Thank you. And you're dressed very smartly, which reminds me to apologise for still being in my site visit clothes, not being smart myself. Okay, in keeping with convention, I'm going to take evidence from the applicant first, and then I'll take evidence from the council, followed by Hoffwig, and then from Mr Rogerson and Mr Wells. Mr Campbell, I don't know whether you've got Miss Platt first or Mr Briggs for evidence. Are you taking evidence from Miss Platt first? Okay, well, okay, we can confirm that later. Parties, as we go through the inquiry, I just ask parties not to give repetitive evidence, but I'm very happy for parties to simply say they agree with evidence already presented in cases where there are aligned views. For anybody watching who's not familiar with the inquiry process, the sequence for each witness is that firstly, the witness gives what's called evidence in chief, drawn from their recognition and inquiry report. They may then be cross-examined or asked questions by opposing parties. I may ask questions, and then represented witnesses will be re-examined. After all the sessions have concluded, parties will have an opportunity to submit closing statements in writing. You don't need to do that orally within the session. The deadlines for that work were set in the note of the pre-examination meeting, which also states that I'll need a summary of each party's overall position so that I can include that within the report itself. And the deadlines are Friday, the 22nd of September for the Council, Hoffwig, Mr Rogerson and Mr Wells, and Friday, the 29th of September for the applicant. I'm happy for people to read short extracts from recognitions, and I'm also happy to have them taken as read. And as Mr Trinick has done this morning, if I can be told at the start of each session which documents are going to be referred to, I can get them up on screen ready. Just a note about my site inspections. In late May, I carried out unaccompanied site inspections throughout the area. That included most of the EIA viewpoints. I think all of the EIA viewpoints that we've got visualisations for, apart from Brimond Hill, which I will go to. I've also been to the site visit locations suggested by Hoffwig, the community councils and some individuals, and obviously going to those locations involved quite a lot of travel on the local road network and some walking routes too. And I may make further site inspections in response to matters arising from this session. I did also go to locations close to the assessed residential viewpoints too. Before we begin, I'm just going to give participants an opportunity to ask any questions on what I've outlined so far and to highlight any urgent matters that are arising. Is there anything people want to mention?
No, thank you.
Just that hopefully you have a list of documents from me. I sent them in to the case officer. If you don't, I can arrange for them to come to you somehow this morning.
I can't get on my government emails here.
Well, then
I've got a file wall that's being problematic, but if I could have a printed out list or a written list, that would help.
I'll ask Mr McIntosh to... Sorry? It's being done at the moment, thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. There's a couple of things that I wanted to just mention that are relevant to this session. Firstly, there was one additional party who had intended to take part but can't. That's another local resident, Robin Worsman. She's provided a written statement that's on file that I've flagged up to the participants in case they want to respond to anything in that. And Ms Worsman has since submitted a drawing to go with that statement, which is also on file now. That went on file last week. Secondly, this is probably a bit out of date now, but Hoffwig have submitted some contextual maps relating to the location and context of the Boon Loyne and Cleonsed wind farms. Those should be up on the DPEA website by now. And thirdly, last week, I know there's been an exchange of views between the applicant and Hoffwig on visualisations, which I expect will come out in evidence during the sessions. So if people don't have anything other than that to raise now, I can hand over or invite Mr Trinick to introduce your witness. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I call Neil Ferber, who's already assumed the position over there. Just on documents, we have emailed you a list of documents which will be raised in the cross-examination of Carol Anderson, I'll print that out and give it to you in the break. Do you have the list for Mr. Ferber's in chief? Good. Thank you very much. There is an errata sheet which has been circulated by email. The errata are so minor, frankly, I'm not going to go through them. They make no difference to the evidence. That will reach you in due course. Mr. Ferber, and with your permission, ma'am, we will take the precognition as read and go directly to some additional points. And the first of those points takes us to the report of Carol Anderson, which is document something or other, lost the number already. Someone help me.
014003.
Thank you. And to paragraph 4.3 of that document on page 6. Ms. Anderson says there, the Hill Affair comprises an isolated area, 4.3. The applicant's landscape consultant appears to have had no involvement in the selection of the proposed development site. I think I'd like you to respond to that in terms of how developers normally select sites, the normal involvement of practices such as yours and the involvement of your practice on this occasion.
Certainly. So in relation to the typical approach that I've experienced with developers, they have their own GIS sieve mapping database, and that includes a variety of technical elements that help them to guide site selection. I won't go through the full list, but it includes matters such as wind speed, access feasibility, landscape designations, and other matters. In terms of Pegasus's role, we're in some instances asked to undertake high-level feasibility studies of sites that have been put forward as potential development sites by developers in terms of landscape and visual matters. In this instance, that didn't happen. We were asked in February 2022, prior to the EIA scoping being formulated, to basically look at an indicative 11 turbine scheme of up to 250 metre tip height. So that was the scheme at the point that Pegasus were involved, and at that point in time, the design input in terms of refining that initial scoping layout was requested by RES to us.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to swap my pen at that point. It's a bit duff. Thank you.
Paragraph 5.2 of the Samson Inquiry Report on page 9. The Hill Affair comprises an isolated area, steep side and rounded hills, limited extent, and I emphasise here, relatively narrow at just around 7 kilometres. Again, my apologies. Paragraph 5.2 on page 9. Hill Affair comprises an isolated area, steep-sided and rounded hills, limited in extent and emphasising a relatively narrow at just around 7 kilometres at its widest point. I'd like you to, taking into account the rest of that paragraph as well, give me your response to what Carol Anderson says there.
Yeah, I think if we could turn up the topography plan, which is the LVIA figure 6.15, which is document reference 1.60. And that gives, if people have that in front of them, that provides an indication of where the site is in relation to the other landform, with the yellow colours being at higher elevation, the green being the sort of lowlands.
I mean, can I just pause for a second? Because I need to follow this. 1.60. Sorry, 1.60 as opposed to 1.160. My apologies.
Yeah, sorry, I haven't found the right document. What's the document reference?
I've got that now, thank you.
I've not got it yet.
Sorry, I thought it was 1.60.
001006.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I've shorthanded by removing the zeros.
Okay, I haven't got that one. What is the name of the figure?
Just
Figure six.
so it's 001
Yeah.
060.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Yeah, I've got that. Thank you.
Great. So just to briefly recap, the landform is obviously indicated with the highest landform colours are browns, which are predominantly within the Cairngorms National Park to the west, but also in some of the areas beyond the national park. The next elevation down is the yellow colours, which includes the site, and then you've got the various shades of pale green and dark green, illustrating the sort of valley landforms. I think the first point to note, and Miss Anderson does pick this up at her paragraph 5.2, she does mention about the summits within the Hill of Fare are not as distinctive as the rocky top peaks found in other units, and she gives examples of that. So just to point out where those are, Mitre Tap is located at viewpoint 4, which is about 19 kilometres to the north. And we've also got Clachnabon, which is another high point that's located approximately 16.5 kilometres to the south, and that's identified by wireframe 6. So we've got wireframes from both of these locations. We don't need to go to those, but it's just to emphasise the location of these more distinctive hill summits. The other hill summits within the same character type as the Hill of Fare within Aberdeenshire also include Tap of North, which is in northwest Aberdeenshire in the Grampian outliers. So that's another example. And in brief summary, all of those viewpoints are, all of those landform features are more distinctive than the Hill of Fare. And the reasons for that is because they're higher, they're generally rockier, the slopes are steeper, they've got greater heritage interest by virtue of scheduled monuments and hill forts on the top of them. And the final point is that they're more popular than the Hill of Fare. Now, I reached that conclusion with reference to the fact that there are car parking facilities for visitors to reach some of those peaks. You've also got events that are specifically associated with some of those peaks, such as Clachnabon has an annual fell race to the summit, to the Granite Tour. So it's just sort of drawing the distinction between the Hill of Fare and these other distinctive landforms within the study area, but also within the wider landscape character type in Aberdeenshire.
Okay. I think you also want to go to one or two viewpoints in order to explore what Carol Anderson says.
Yes.
And we'll do this fairly quickly, please.
Yes.
So we turn to viewpoint 1, first of all, which is in, oh, goodness me, 001.116 onwards are the viewpoints.
Yep. So all I'm going to refer to for each of these viewpoints, just to give you advance notice, is I'm just referring to the photography with the wireline underneath. So we're not looking at photomontages. We're just looking at just purely the baseline landform. So At viewpoint 1, you can see that the hill of Fair isn't very prominent. The landform itself is mostly screened by forestry.
So this is a view from the north, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Right, so we're going to go around the compass. That's viewpoint 1. Yep.
So that's viewpoint 1, which is a close view from the north. A view that's further away from the north is viewpoint 12. And in that viewpoint, you can obviously see the Hill of Fair in the centre of the view. It's about 7 kilometres away at this point. But also to the left of the Hill of Fair, you can see a closer intervening landform that's slightly lower than the Hill of Fair on the skyline. But there is other sort of elevated landform in the view.
And then we move to the south, please, viewpoint 4.
Yeah, and the point to note on viewpoint 4, this again starting off closer to the site. The only landform visible above the forestry is to the left of centre. So a lot of the landform is disguised by forestry.
Yep, carry on. We're going to draw this together at the end.
Yes. We're going
19
to
is your next one.
19, so the same process, looking further afield.
That's from the east.
No, it's still from the south.
Oh, you're on 19, are you? Yep, from the south. Yep.
So 19 is where you do get a good appreciation of the landform of the Hill of Fair. You do see more of the landform against the sky. It's just a point of caveat on this that it is a very specific viewpoint available from a limited area. But you certainly do get appreciation of the landform of much of the site there. And then to the east, viewpoint 3. So at viewpoint 3, we're looking at the sort of end of the Hill of Fair, and it's obviously quite a prominent feature in that particular view. And just to point out that the wind farm would be largely screened from that viewpoint, but you obviously, when you're driving along that road, it's on the horizon, very much the sort of main landform in the view. And then further away, we go to viewpoint 20. So this is a view that's further from the east, and obviously the undulating sort of landform Hill of Fair is in the centre of the view, to the right of the pylon. To the left of the pylon is elevated land that's basically sort of between the Hill of Fair and the National Park, and that does include Clachnabon. And you can just make out the sort of granite tor just to the right of the sign post. There's a little nib on the horizon.
And then we go around to the west.
Yeah, finally to the west. So this is a close viewpoint from the west. The landform is doesn't contain any distinctive features. It's a fairly smooth profile, but it's obviously you know a dominant element in the view at that location.
And finally, viewpoint 18.
So again, in this view, this is a more distant view, and the landform does appear a more prominent feature, the Hill of Fare. But just to note, this is experienced obliquely from a lay-by, so it's got to be viewed in that context.
Right, taking us through some viewpoints, and going back to what Carol Anderson says, I stress in particular, limited in extent, this is Hill of Fare, relatively narrow, and give an impression of the hills being larger and higher than indicated by their relief. I'd like you to tell the reporter your view of the impressions, your impressions of the Hill of Fare in terms of Carol Anderson's evidence.
Well, I think it does vary quite a bit depending on how close you are to the site and which direction you're in. So I would say that that in some views it is prominent, in other views much less prominent, and that just does depend on the particular circumstances of where you're viewing it from.
Okay, paragraph 5.8 of Carol Anderson's report. Hard to see how the landscape character effects of the proposed development would be contained in any way, and so forth. But further on, I consider that although Hill of Fare would still be perceived as an isolated small hill group in these peripheral views, 1, 4, 6 and 7 viewpoints that she referred to, and also when seen further afield from adjacent landscape character types, locating large wind turbines up to 200 metres high on its high tops and ridges would result in a substantial detraction of its distinctive character and diminishment, I emphasise, of the perceived scale of the hills. I conclude that given these significant adverse effects on character, stress again, the landform of these hills would not remain the single most important defining characteristic. Do you consider that the perceived scale of the Hill of Fare, Mr. Ferber, would be diminished by the wind turbines to the extent indicated by Carol Anderson?
No, I don't agree with that conclusion. And I think I'd like to just start off making brief reference to figure 6.16, which is reference 1.61. Yeah, 001.016. Yes. And I think that the point, I don't know if everybody's got there yet.
001.016.
Yes, figure 6.16. And this illustrates the landscape context to 5 kilometres. We there? Yeah. Thank you. So it's just a correction really about the dimensions that Miss Anderson quotes elsewhere in her evidence about the dimensions of the Hill of Fare. And I simply looked at this plan and counted the grid squares, and I make the dimensions 9.5 kilometres long by about 6 kilometres in depth. So that's quite a bit more than what's been quoted elsewhere. And I think the importance of that in relation to the proposed wind turbines is that they cover a much smaller area, which I have measured off as being approximately 3.5 kilometres long by about 2.3 kilometres deep. So in total, taking into account that the full dimensions of the Hill of Fare, the proposed turbines would occupy approximately a third of the length and depth of the hill. And I'd also like to illustrate the sort of level of containment with reference to viewpoint 10. And for that, we need to bring up the additional submission that had the access tracks and the BES marked on it. And that's a core document reference. I assume it's 002009. I think I'd like to just refer to the first sheet, the reason being that the montage is obviously cropped down a bit, and I think sheet A, you know, gives you the wider context of the edges of the hill affair. You can see the extent of the turbines from the wireline below, and for my sort of professional judgment is that by virtue of those turbines being set back from the plateau edge, the landform itself wouldn't be diminished by the turbines. Now, I appreciate that perception is not just from when you're within the site, it's from outside of the site as well. But I don't consider that the perception of the scale of the hills would be materially diminished by the turbines in any views. But what I do accept, and Ms Anderson makes the same point, is that as man-made features, the turbines would be significant detracting elements in the landscape, but I don't believe that they would diminish the landform scale to the degree that Ms Anderson is claiming. And I think that the reason why that is the case is that because turbines are slimline structures, they've got a moving rotor, you can't compare the height of a turbine to the height of landform. And I think also that the landform and the associated land cover would essentially remain unchanged. And those would be the most important defining characteristics of the landscape in the views, albeit that the turbines would obviously be an adverse addition.
Thank you very much. I was going to take you to 5:15, but in fact, I think we're going to go straight to Carol Anderson at 654, which is on page 16. This is where she says that, noting that Carol Anderson agrees with the finding of the EIA in terms of effects on views from sections of certain roads, she additionally considers that significant adverse effects will be experienced from sections of the Slug Road, the A957, when travelling north and descending into Deeside past Durras Forest. Do you agree with Ms Anderson's identification of significant effects from the area of that viewpoint?
No, I don't. And we scoped out the A957, and just for reference, that's at table 6.3.4 of the technical appendix 6.4 in the LVIA. The reference for that, for the record, is just 001 0173. So we basically concluded that there were potential for effects, but due to the distance, separation distance, they wouldn't be considered significant. In terms of context of whether effects had the potential to be significant or not from other locations, it's useful to note that there isn't any disagreement between us. There isn't a disagreement by Ms Anderson that no significant effects would occur from the B974, which is approximately 6.2 kilometres south of the site. And there's also no disagreement that there wouldn't be any significant effects from Bridge of Kenny, which is 12.78 kilometres from the proposal. And I note with respect to that viewpoint that settlements are of higher sensitivity than road users. So it's sort of unclear in this context why Ms Anderson has reached the conclusions that oblique views from the A957, 13 kilometres from the proposal, would be considered significant. So I consider that the calibration seems a bit odd and no justification has been provided.
Thank you. You've been to this viewpoint yourself?
Yes, I have.
And what was your experience there?
Yeah, so I think basically after you pass through an area of forestry, the hill of Fair does become visible about 13 kilometres distant, and initially this is oblique to the direction of travel. You know, I don't think that it can be considered to be a focus. It's just one of a range of elevated hills in the view. I just don't see that if you have a balanced consideration of sensitivity and magnitude, that with road users being medium, the magnitude of change would have to be greater than medium in all likelihood for that effect to be deemed significant. I don't consider that's the correct approach.
Now turn please to Kelder Platt's inquiry report, which is document, oh God, find it.
016001.
01, that's it, yep. And within it to paragraph 5.4 on page 10. And 5.4 is no criticism, quite a long paragraph, so I'm not going to read it out to the inquiry, but if people could just take a few seconds to read it for themselves.
Sorry, do you want to comment?
I'm waiting for...
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. In order to deal with this point, you'll need to get out one document, and that is CD 001.012, that is Chapter 6 of the EIAR, is the LVIA. And you might as well go to the right place. It's paragraph 6.6.182, which is on internal page 37. And also, with apologies, I'd ask you to dig out CD 013.020, which are the A3 or more than A3 pull-out series of Y lines produced by the applicant. And the second Y line in is Scolty Hill. Armed with this information, Mr. Ferber, do you agree with Ms. Platt's assessment of the effects from Scolty Hill?
No, I don't. I think that she's overstated the significance of effects from Scolty Hill. We obviously identify a significant effect within the LVIA. We judge that, you know, we've sort of judged that effect with sort of reference to the fact that it's sort of 7 kilometres away. And we've now got a wire line to show the difference and what we've actually...
Just stopping you there,
yeah.
just so we deal with the the paragraph in the EIAR, I think it's at 66184, where the conclusion is a major moderate effect.
That's correct, yes. So the magnitude of change we determine is medium, whereas Ms Platt assesses it as high. And what I would just like to point out is that if you compare the lateral extent of the wind turbines in views at a similar distance, we've got the view from Tom's Cairn, which is viewpoint 14. We don't need to go to that. I'm just producing some information that I've just measured off the visuals that were submitted. But from Tom's Cairn, which is also to the south, viewpoint 14, the wind turbines are 13.2 degrees horizontal extent. From Scolty Hill, they are higher. They're 22.1 degrees. Our assessment from both of those locations is that the magnitude is medium. Where you get to a high magnitude of change, that's an example for that is viewpoint 10, where you've got 40.3 degrees, almost twice the amount. So, you know, we don't see that there's a big enough difference between how the turbines would appear between Tom's Cairn and Scolty Hill for there to be that sort of major adverse conclusion. I think also if you've been to Scolty Hill, Mum, you will note that there were 360-degree views. The hill of Fair is in one direction, but you've got all the views towards towards the national park and the undeveloped area of landscape to the south.
Yeah, I've just confirmed I've been to Scolty Hill and Tom's Cairn.
And the distances, just get them before the inquiry, to Scolty Hill is 7.8 kilometres. For Tom's Cairn, it's 9.8, and for Meikle Tap, viewpoint 10, it's 2 kilometres. Now, if we turn to paragraph 5.8 of Kelder Platt's inquiry report, please. It's on page 11. And again, people could just read that paragraph quickly. I'll ask my question. Which indeed is my last question in chief. Okay, ma'am. Thank you. We're dealing here with viewpoints 9, 20 and 21. You've got the viewpoints in front of you. We can turn to them as required. Do you agree with Ms Platt that at these viewpoints the turbines would appear prominent and the effects would be significant?
No, I don't agree that they would be prominent or significant. At viewpoint 9, the view is a fleeting oblique glimpse from Minor Road. And getting to that particular location, majority of views in the direction of the site is screened by roadside vegetation. So it's a very, very short viewing experience. No footway, so just something that's experienced in cars. Viewpoint 20, we don't think that that's significant. It's 11.5 kilometres from the turbines. We looked at it briefly before, and the dominant feature is the pylon in the foreground. And I would also note that the council, Ms Anderson, agrees with us that wouldn't be significant, the impact of the proposals at that location. Viewpoint 21, similar conclusions. Council agree with ourselves that the effects aren't significant. 9.3 kilometres from the turbines, and it's an incidental backdrop in a view from the play park. So quite a narrow view of the proposed development.
I was incorrect when I said that was my last question. There is one more. Takes us to Kelderplaat's precognition this time, please. Which, sorry to be hopeless on document numbers, but I'll find it.
It's document 016036.
Thank you.
Can you remind me the paragraph?
Paragraph 5.3 is on page 3. If you could just read that paragraph to yourselves. When people have read it, also get out, please, Kelderplaat's figure 2, which is 016.1. It's part of the inquiry report. And armed with that figure, and I think with some viewpoints, Mr. Ferber, you want to address what Kelderplaat says. First of all, do you identify what she terms severe effects?
No, we don't use that terminology. We recognise that they're major and significant, which I think Miss Platt acknowledges as well in the paragraph. But you know, the terminology that she's using would only really apply if there was a very high magnitude and potentially overbearing effects, and that doesn't occur at any of the viewpoints that are presented.
Secondly, does Ms. Platt's figure 2 indicate, as she describes in 5.3, a 360-degree experience of significant effects?
No, I don't think it's accurate to say that it's 360 degrees, because there aren't significant effects that have been agreed at a number of viewpoints. So those viewpoints, we don't need to go to them, but just for the record, those viewpoints 3, 9, 15, 16, 20 and 21, we don't come to the conclusion that the effects are significant from those locations. Also, more important, well, perhaps even more importantly, is the fact that there's significant forestry and limited receptors to the south of the site and to the northwest. And in terms of settlements, the significant effects would be restricted to relatively discrete areas of each settlement. And from the field assessment, we sort of determined that in many parts of each of the settlements where there have been significant effects recorded, there wouldn't be any views of the turbines, or very limited views due to screening by other buildings, tree cover or landform. And just a very quick point on that, the ZTV is a zone of theoretical visibility. It's a bare earth exercise, so it doesn't suggest, just because a settlement is within the ZTV, that you've necessarily got views of the proposals. And I just wanted to quickly run through those settlements where we have identified significant effects in the last couple of minutes. We don't need to turn to any viewpoints, it's just to sort of talk about where the distribution of effects are. So from Mid-Mar, viewpoint 1 is obviously slightly closer to the proposals than the settlement itself. But many of the turbines are screened by intervening landform regardless of the forestry. I'm also unclear what Ms Platt is referring to as sensitive community facilities. At Midmar, we're not clear what that means. At Echt, viewpoint 2, the viewpoint is representative of views from the western edge of the settlement, where comparatively few properties face south or west, the wind turbines to the southwest. So generally, from the remainder of the settlement, the views of the proposals would be fully or partially screened by buildings. Torfins, we've got viewpoint 5 and 16, and those two visualizations sort of present a contrast in the visibility of the proposals, where you've got some open but quite limited views from the northern end of Woodside Road at the eastern edge of the settlement, and you contrast that with the much more restricted views from the play park at viewpoint 16. So views from the remainder of the settlement in between those viewpoints would be fully or partially screened by buildings. On to the last couple of settlements where we've identified significant effects. At Banchory, we've got viewpoint 19, which is quite a narrow view right at the edge of the settlement travelling north. You will realise when you go on site that most of the views from the northern edge of Banchory are screened by tree planting. Some of that's forestry, but some of it will be woodland planting that would remain sort of long term. There are not any views from the town centre. That lies outside the ZTV. So where most of the activity is within Banchory, there wouldn't be any views of the proposal. And finally, from Cluny and Sorkin, which is represented by viewpoint 12, there are views from the southern boundary of the settlement, but that's really for road users. And most of the residential views from the settlement are restricted by tall hedgerows within gardens. And further north within the settlement, again, a similar pattern where you get intervening buildings restricting views. There will be some glimpses from street level, but generally the views are restricted by intervening buildings.
Mr. Ferber, thank you very much. Will you please stay there? There may be some questions for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trinick. Do you want a short break?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, I'm just going to take a short break just till 1:15, and then Mr. Finlay is going to cross-examine. Okay, Mr. Finlay, you can start your cross-examination.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Ferber.
Good afternoon.
We've got just some introductory questions to begin with. Pegasus, you tell us in your evidence, so we're looking here at 1341 or 013041, which is your report.
Sorry, could you mention the paragraph number?
Yeah, 1.10.
Yes.
Now, this is possibly the least important point of the day, but I think you tell us there that Pegasus were instructed in March 2022. You told us in oral evidence this morning it was February 2022. I just wondered which it was.
I'm not sure, but it was around that time.
More importantly, do you know when Pegasus first visited the site?
No, I mean, I wasn't employed at until sort of November 2023. at the company. So all of the initial work and the EIA were undertaken by colleagues. As I explained, that a colleague who was going to take this role wasn't able to due to illness.
Yep, no, I understand that. Thank you. So you don't know that. And then, and I understand from your evidence this morning that there were no other consultants employed before Pegasus, i.e. Pegasus didn't replace anyone. They came on board, as you indicated to the reporter, later on in the process.
That's my understanding. I don't know any difference to that.
Now, in terms of your involvement, I think in your report, you tell us that, as you've just indicated, you enjoyed Pegasus at the end of 2023. In fact, in your Appendix 1, Para 3, you say it's December 2024, possibly the second least important point of the day. Was it 23 or 24 you joined Pegasus?
It was 23.
23, grateful. Yeah, the reason I asked that, because if you go back to 1.11 of your report, you say you were involved in the post-EIAR submission phase of the project, having joined Pegasus in December 2023. What do you mean by involved? You didn't visit the site, as I understand it, until earlier this year.
Yeah, I think that maybe post-EIA submission phase is a bit of an odd description, maybe not the most appropriate phrase on reflection.
Were you primarily only really involved when you were asked to give evidence and undertook your site inspections?
Yeah, I think when it became apparent that my colleague wasn't able, due to long-term illness, to be able to fulfil that role, that was something that I was approached to undertake. I don't recall exactly when that was, but it wouldn't have been, probably not much before sort of March, April of this year.
Grateful, thank you. Now, in terms of your experience of wind energy, you tell us in your report, and indeed paragraph 5 of your Appendix 1, that you presented landscape and visual evidence at a number of wind energy development public inquiries and hearings. This is not as nationalistic as it sounds, but have you presented evidence in Scotland before?
No, I haven't, not in Scotland.
Okay. Well, my understanding is there have been very few public inquiries into and hearings into wind energy in England for some time.
Yeah, well, I was involved in the potato pot public inquiry in Cumbria back in 2013.
2013?
Yeah.
And what scale of wind turbine were you looking at then?
It was a wind cluster, 100 metres to tip.
100 metres to tip.
But
So, I mean, you're clearly a well-qualified landscape consultant, so I'm not hopefully not taking a cheap point against you, but in terms of your assessment of other wind farms that you've been specifically involved in, the reporter can record that your most recent one was 2013 with turbines being...
No, that isn't correct. We were referring to England in particular. In the last 2 to 3 years, I've been involved in Welsh DNS schemes at Mynydd, Carnia, Cefn and Mynydd Glyn.
Okay.
So the turbines there were up to 180.
180.
Metres
So 2
to
in Wales up to 180.
Yeah.
And were you giving evidence there?
It was the DNS, the DNS format of basically my involvement was to prepare the LVIA and to represent the developer at the hearing sessions.
Yeah, no, quite different from the Electricity Act in that sense. I understand that. Yeah. Grateful. And then in 112 of your evidence, you refer to you you say that you've considered the findings of the LVIA, and apologies if I've missed it, but I don't think anywhere in your evidence do you tell us whether you agree with it or adopt those findings, or whether there are any findings that you are specifically unhappy with.
No, I don't specifically state that. I did come to the agreement in terms of the level of effects for the sort of overwhelming majority of receptors. I think there was a slight difference in opinion from one of the residential receptors that's contained within the updated RVAA. Right,
yeah, well, that's a matter that may be a primary concern to others in the room, but leaving that aside, for my purposes, we can take it you adopt and agree with the findings in the EIAR.
I do.
Full. Now, that's all by way of introduction. Moving now on to the project, and it would be useful for parties to have CD 1.9 or 001.009, which is chapter 3 of the EIAR, in front of them. And my understanding from your previous answers is that the evidence that, and you cover this in your report at paragraphs 214 to 228, is that you've gleaned this evidence from primarily from the written material because you weren't involved at the time.
That's correct.
Grateful. So if we look at the site selection, which begins at 3.2, 3.2.2 to 3.2.6, we can see what's set out there, but what is clear is that there was, we know there was no input from Pegasus or other consultants at the time, and there is nothing in the site selection criteria there that deals with landscape and visual impact.
I don't agree with that. I think at 3.2.4 it talks about natural and built heritage constraints, and I would take that to include landscape designations and those sort of matters.
So if we accept that that refers to landscape designations, i.e. whether the site is an NSLA or an NSA or a national park.
Well, I don't know because I wasn't involved in producing the GIS model. I'm just sort of saying, I'm just looking at the evidence that's in front of me in the chapter.
But you don't know what?
I don't know. I can't answer that question because I wasn't involved.
Can I just check which paragraph you mentioned there?
Sorry, 3.2.4.
It's the third bullet point in 3.2.4, natural and built heritage constraints. Grateful. Then in 3.2.8 we look at the consideration of the main alternatives, and we can see what's said in 3.2.8 and 3.2.9 about that. But once the site had been selected, the main alternatives included, as we see in 3.2.9, were design, turbine specification, location, size and scale, etc.
That's what it says, yeah.
Yeah. And again, if we look at under 3.3.1, under key issues and constraints, it says once the site was identified, key issues and constraints for consideration were established. And there we see at that stage, we see the first consideration being landscape designations and visual amenity. Now that would seem to be the first time that that has really been considered.
I don't agree with that because I think it could be interpreted as coming under the natural and heritage constraints earlier. I think that under 3.3.1 it's just providing a more expanded list, more detailed list, some of which would have been considered at an earlier stage as well. That's my interpretation.
I'd suggest to you that doesn't follow naturally from sensible reading of the documentation, but it's a matter for the reporter. So you pick up the phrase key issues and constraints in 3.3.1, and then in 3.3.3 it says the identification of key issues and constraints during the iterative process has allowed for issues to be addressed and careful placement of infrastructure. That again would suggest that the only influence of landscape designations and visual amenity was on careful placement. Certainly visual amenity, no reference at all to visual amenity prior to that.
No, I respectfully disagree. I think as I don't want to repeat myself, but 3.2.4, you know, there was consideration of natural and built heritage constraints, and I think that there's just a finer grained consideration of optimization of layout through the design process that you are referencing at 3.3.1.
Well, I just recollect you don't know what natural and built heritage constraints refers to or what consideration was given, but that's your interpretation.
Well, I think it's a sensible interpretation. That's commonly what it considers. Is may consider designations at a broad scale the same as heritage constraints. It's probably not going to look at visual amenity issues in a lot of detail, and that's when you look at it in a finer grain of, a finer grain of design iteration under the under the design process. And obviously we set out in the chapter those stages and how the layout changed as there was a public consultation event where the turbines were reduced in height and number and various other constraints inputted into the process. So it's obviously as listed under 3.3, it's a multitude of factors that influence the layout, not solely landscape and visual issues.
Of course not. Disagree with your view there, but let's see how well your view is borne out by table 3.1. If we turn to that, which is on my electronic page 3, the original layout 1, we can see was produced in Q3 2020. So it's about a year and a half before Pegasus were employed. Do you see that? Just below site capacity.
Yes,
first.
I can see that, yeah.
And we can see that ornithology work started there, and it started at 200 metres high. Going on to layout 2, we've gone down from 32 turbines to 16, but we're still at 200 metres in height. The further feasibility studies taking for Q4 2020, this is the first reference to landscape and visual. Do you see that in the first line?
Yeah.
And then following results of a landscape and visual review, and that again is pre-Pegasus. So that's after the site has been identified. A wind turbine developable area is created as a high-level guide to form a single coherent group, etc. We can read what it says. And the turbines were located to avoid deep peat and brown areas on the west of the site. And we can see the layout there.
Yeah.
Do you know at that stage why turbines were removed from the east side of the site? Was that due to deep peat?
Not from my understanding, but I wasn't involved in the project at that point.
So is it fair to say you just simply don't know?
I don't know, but I think you would imply that the results of the landscape and visual review that were undertaken were looking at focusing the, having the areas within a focused zone of the site rather than extend across the whole hill of Fair.
Well, I just wonder why that was from a landscape and visual perspective. You haven't seen any landscape and visual material that would help you answer that question, have you?
No, but I would go from my own sort of, you know, when you look at the visuals that have been prepared as part of the application, certainly views from the east of the site, the visibility of the turbines is reduced by them being set back further into the site and away from the eastern edge. So you're going to have evidently a reduced impact on the surrounding area if you concentrate the turbines in one part of the site. I think that's fairly apparent.
Well, we can see it says the results of which informed the layout with turbines located to avoid deep heat, brown areas on the west of the site. We can see that. Okay, but that's your interpretation. If we go on to layout 3, this was the scoping submission in Q2 of 2022, about the time when Pegasus were employed, and we can see that the height proposed at that stage was 250 metres.
That's correct.
And if we see there's a fuller paragraph, starts with no topography to hide the turbines. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a broad brush statement, so don't...
Do you agree with it as a broad brush statement?
Well, I mean, I think it's fairly self-evident that if you've got turbines on an elevated landform, they're going to be visible, and that's the case with all proposals.
What's the
But
answer to my question?
you know, I didn't write chapter 3, and it's before Pegasus's time, so I think it's it is a broad brush statement.
It is. I've asked you again, I'll ask you only once more. Do you agree with that broad brush statement or not?
Not entirely, no, because I think that you can, and it's been demonstrated in the visuals, by setting the turbines back from the edge of the plateau, you reduce the visibility of the turbines. In some cases, you do hide the turbines from particular viewpoints, or some of the turbines from particular viewpoints.
Well, I suggest to you that's looking with rose-coloured tints at it. So the justification, the sentence goes on, with no topography to hide the turbines and market signals indicating a trend towards taller turbines. The layout is progressed with tip heights at 250 metres, and then there's reference to other wind farms in that case. We can presume that Pegasus were employed by this stage and were happy with that proposal of 250 metre turbines.
I'm not sure, I wasn't at the company at that point, but I think it's common practice when scoping reports are initially put in is that there isn't often a fixed layout, and the maximum parameters are often adopted with the expectation that those will get refined down.
Well, as I understand it for scoping that, you're putting forward what you consider would be a potentially feasible operation, not your maximum ask with the hope that it will be negotiated down.
I don't know. I think Pegasus were appointed at the junction that that was already been decided to go in for scoping at that layout size. I think that the reduction in tip height or the further iterations were as a result of design workshops, community consultation events, etc.
But we're coming to those, but what we can see at that stage, given the what consideration had been given to siting and design, it was considered by the applicant and with Pegasus in their team by that stage that 250 metre turbines were potentially appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not clear on what level of assessment had been done at that point in time by Pegasus.
Well, then we go on to the next iteration. The turbines have come down to 242.5 metres. I'm assuming that that's due to a particular choice of turbine rather than the reduction of 7.5 metres being any significant difference.
That would appear to be the case, although it does say, following that note, that in light of further L&V reviews, larger buffers were applied to properties and settlements which pushed the turbines inward.
Understand that, but it doesn't
Yeah.
say that they reduce the height.
That's correct, yeah.
So what we're having there is the EIA team brought together a workshop to refine the layout in Q4 of 2022, and that refined layout is what we see on the left. And in light of the further landscape and visual reviews, as you've just pointed out, larger buffers were applied to properties and settlements, which pushed turbines away from the southern, western and northern edges. And that led to a reduction in one turbine for that reason.
But that's a fair summary, yeah.
Yeah. And that appears to be pushed away from those edges for visual impact reasons. Larger buffers to properties and settlements.
That's right.
And no doubt Mr. Campbell will pursue whether those buffers are large enough. Then if we go on to layout 5, the turbine heights have come down to 11 at 180 and 5 at 200. And
that's right.
the reason for that is given as public feedback and concern raised over the height and consultation with aviation stakeholders. And it goes on to say, indicated that potential adverse effects on both radar and instrument flight procedures could be mitigated by reducing the tip heights. Reducing the tip heights would also further lessen the potential impacts upon setting of cultural heritage assets and residential amenity. So it would appear to be a twofold reason to reduce the heights: aviation or radar and residential amenity.
Well, and cultural heritage as well.
And
yeah.
cultural
Yeah.
heritage. But do you know the extent to which aviation led to a reduction in tip heights? Because if we go on to the second table, which is electronic page 10 of 13, it rather suggests there that the reduction in height, that's, if you've got that, it's got aviation on the
Yeah.
left. The reduction in height was due to ensure that the turbines weren't visible from a particular radar station.
Yeah, I see that.
Have you got any reason to suggest that the reduction in height to the particular height concerned, i.e. 180 and 200, was not primarily due to that factor?
I don't know, because I'm not aware of the detail in terms of, you know, how many turbines were affected, whether it was all of the turbines or particular turbines. It's from my limited understanding of aviation matters, is something that is often sort of negotiated. And going back to sort of landscape and visual effects and cultural heritage effects, you're obviously seeking to achieve always a minimisation of landscape and visual effects, but obviously in light of the need to maximise energy.
Yeah, just to interrupt you there, there's no reference here to landscape, is there?
Not in relation to the aviation, but you wouldn't...
No, not in relation to layout 5.
Visual amenity, yeah, visual amenity, yeah.
Not landscape.
Yeah.
Because if you go to your report at 224, you suggest a reduction in height was done to best balance the commercial reality of tall turbines and the minimisation of landscape and visual effects. You haven't referred to aviation there at all, have you?
No, it's a statement of the fact that it's not saying that that's why it was reduced. It's just saying that the fact that it has been reduced is considered to represent the best balance.
Well, so it's just important that the design changes, as I understand it, that leave us with the heights that we now have, were due, as I think we've just agreed, to aviation matters, and we don't know.
Well, we don't know, to be honest, because we don't know the details of the aviation and what that was
We do know
describing.
it's due to aviation, and we do know it's due to residential amenity and cultural heritage. Those were the three factors that are referred to. And what we don't know is the extent to which the specific heights were set by aviation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that in addition to residential amenity, there is the settlement point as well that came up in an earlier iteration of the scheme.
But there doesn't seem to have been any consideration of landscape impact in reducing the heights, or indeed location of the turbines at this stage.
Well, I think they go hand in hand. Usually, if you minimise the effects in terms of reducing the height of a turbine or pushing it away from the edge of the plateau, you're also reducing the landscape character effects.
Well, that's your ex post facto justification, isn't it? Nothing in the document which justifies that.
No, and I think that there isn't anything unusual in these documents to provide a summary of how a design has evolved. It's not possible for me coming to the inquiry at this stage that I have to understand exactly how we arrived at the design that we have.
Yes. So everything else you've said is pure surmise. If you go to 226 of your report, which, just for everyone's note, is 1341 or 013041, and we can put that chapter away or close it down. You here refer to Nature Scott's best practice design principles. Just give me a moment just to...
Sorry, which paragraph?
226.
Thanks.
You've put a reference here, 001-200, which is a technical appendix. Which
Yeah,
is,
that's in the errata. It's corrected in the errata.
right here.
Yeah.
I picked that
So
up.
it's 010.010.
So it's to the practice, it's to citing and design.
It is.
Yeah, right, we'll come. Well, if everyone could open that up to have by way of background before the...
Sorry, could I have the reference again?
1010 or 010010. Now, in your 226, you say the scheme has been informed by Nature Scott best practice design, and the key design issues which were addressed are summarised as follows. Now, that's your summary. Where do we find that mentioned at all in the Chapter 6 of the EIAR? Chapter 6 of the
Yes, no, I'm just looking. Well, I don't think it's mentioned in Chapter 6 because it's covered in Chapter 3.
Okay, where is it mentioned in Chapter 3 of the EIAR?
Well, not in detail. It's talking in general terms, isn't it, about residential amenity and offset from settlements.
So let's just be clear, Mr. Ferber. First of all, those factors are not specifically identified either in Chapter 3 or Chapter 6, as far as you're aware.
Not in that level of detail, no.
And you weren't involved at the time, so this is pure conjecture that they were taken into account, isn't it?
I think when you look at the description of how the turbines were moved back from the ridge, it would be inherent in that you would be adopting some of those practices. For example, bullet point 2 about offsets from properties and settlements being mentioned. The avoidance of inconsistent turbine spacing, outliers or excessive overlapping as the first point is something that would have been considered when the design evolution was undertaken. Also noted in the third bullet point, the position of the substation is mentioned in Design Chapter 3 as being in a more sheltered location. And we do also talk about the reuse of access tracks and minimising cut and fill. So those are all mentioned, and as is the adoption of a reduction in sort of visible turbine aviation lighting.
You don't know, Mr. Ferber, just reiterate, this is pure conjecture whether these were taken into account, this design guidance was taken into account.
Well, no, I don't think it's conjecture. I think it's the evidence is that the scheme is there and it's taken those issues into account. There's no conjecture about it.
It's not whether the issues were taken into account, Mr. Ferber. You're an experienced witness, so please don't bandy words. It's whether this design guidance was addressed in the way that you suggest it was, and that is pure conjecture.
I don't think it is conjecture. I think that Pegasus, as experienced landscape assessors that input into the design of wind farms, would take into account a document that's been, that's basically been in use for at least 8 years. It's part of the standard. It's part of the standard approach. But I don't see that there's anything apart from maybe it's mentioned not in as much detail as what I've produced in my report, but effectively that's what the points that I mentioned in my evidence or inquiry report have been achieved.
Are there any other aspects of siting and design that you consider have been taken into account, or have you sought to encompass them all in your paragraph 2?
Well, I think that, going back to the point about consideration of the siting and design of wind farms in the landscape.
No, Mr. Ferber, just answer the question. Are there any other aspects of siting design that you consider were taken into account that you haven't listed in 226?
No, but I just wanted to qualify that point that I was making, that we have listed within the EIA chapter at 6.4.4 all of the documents that were taken into account, which do include the siting and design of wind farms in the landscape, amongst other technical notes, including the pre-application and scoping advice. So whilst it might not be explicitly set out, that guidance was taken into account. Well,
let's see how far it was. If we turn to siting and design, which is CD 1010, paragraph 3.25, which is electronic page 19 of 50. It's important to site and design a wind farm so that it appears visually balanced in relation to the underlying and surrounding landform. Third sentence, it is also important that the scale and extent of the wind farm does not seem to overwhelm the distinctive character and scale of landform, especially prominent landform. Now we'll come on to discuss the landform in a moment, but that doesn't appear to have been taken into account.
I think I disagree. I think by considering the reduction in height of turbines and pushing them back from the edge, that has been achieved.
It's not in your paragraph 226. It's not in the EIAR. And I'd suggest to you that what we are dealing with here is indeed a prominent landform. The extent of its prominence may be a matter of dispute, but it's a prominent landform. Would you agree?
It's prominent from some locations.
I suggest to you it's prominent from a large number of locations, and that we'll come on to whether the proposal overwhelms the distinctive character or not. If we go to the next paragraph, 326, it refers to the importance of skylines. That is not a paragraph that is referred to in your paragraph 226 or the EIAR, is it?
No.
327, also dealing with skylines. I should really have taken them both together, my apologies, but same question, I presume the same answer. I'll take that as a yes. If we go on to 329, there's a sentence beginning in the fourth line. Narrow bands of uplands between settled and smaller scale valleys should be avoided. Hill of Fare could easily be described as a narrow band of upland.
I don't agree with that description.
Well, it's upland, isn't it?
It's upland, and I also don't agree that the lowlands could be described as small-scale valleys.
Settled, they're settled valleys, at least on one side. It's
They're
certainly
broad.
small, settled and smaller scale landscapes, aren't they? It's exactly what they are. No indication that was taken into account at either siting or design stage. Is there?
Well, it's a general description. We don't, I don't consider that the site meets that description.
Okay. 332, a key design objective will be finding an appropriate scale for the wind farm that is in keeping with that of the landscape. The wind farm should be of minor vertical scale in relation to other key features in the landscape. The wind turbines cannot be said to be of minor vertical scale in relationship to any of the hilltops or that comprise the broader Hill of Fare or any of the specific hilltops that comprise the Hill of Fare.
Well, again, I don't agree. I think when you say key features, are you talking about the landform, or are you talking about individual features within the landscape? I would say that there isn't the conflict to the extent that you're suggesting.
Well, let's just pause. I'm only going to be for you and others, I'm reaching the end of a chapter, and probably be another 4 or 5 minutes. The Hill of Fare is a feature in the landscape, and it's a key feature, is it not?
It's one of a number of landform features that are in.
You dispute it's a key feature.
No, I'm not disputing it's a landform feature.
It's a
But
key.
it's not as
Mr. Ferber, you're
Yeah.
banding words again. Is it a key feature or just a feature?
It's just a feature.
Okay, so you're disputing it's a key feature. We can record that as a matter of disagreement. We can leave the reporter to judge that. But leaving aside that, the 200 or 180 metre turbines are not of minor vertical scale in relation to the Hill of Fare, are they?
But it depends on where you perceive them from, doesn't it?
Well, from all the viewpoints where there are significant effects, representative viewpoints, it would not be considered as being of minor vertical scale, would it?
But I don't think that's the, as I said in my evidence, full compliance with SNH design guidance that's been written, 8 years ago is not possible for commercial scale wind farms. In terms of scale, we've already established that it's not the footprint of the wind farm is occupying an area that is approximately a third of the area of the Hill
Ferber,
of Fair.
would you answer the question, which wasn't, and I didn't put to you full compliance with the guidance as possible, it's whether you've complied with this aspect of it or not. Do you accept you haven't? What we make of that,
don't think that you know, any scheme on any landform could, because I think the link here is about it being minor vertical scale in relation to other key features of the landscape. I don't think that the key features point is engaged here.
Well, I hear what you say, but I suggest to you that there are numerous locations in Scotland where wind turbines can be seen of minor vertical scale in comparison with other key features in the landscape, which, as Miss Anderson has said in her evidence. If we go on to the second bullet point of minor horizontal scale in relation to the key features of the landscape, that will depend upon where you're looking at it from, I accept, but even from the figures you gave them this morning, the horizontal scale of the proposed wind farm could not be described as minor in comparison to the Hill of Fair, could it?
Again, it's coming back to whether you consider it a key feature or not, isn't it? But I think that the photomontages and the relationship of the proposals as they're seen from different locations to the landform would remain, the dominant feature in those views. I don't believe that the wind turbines would dominate to the extent that Miss Anderson is making out.
Well, you move away from the question yet again. And last bullet point, I think we can take it from your answers that we're going to disagree about that. But it's looking at direct scale comparison. We'll look at that when we come to look at the various photomontages, but I suggest to you that direct scale comparison will occur both vertically and horizontally with many factors, including the Hill of Fair as a whole.
I think the scale comparison is limited because of the simplicity of the land cover, that either it's largely forestry or it's open moorland. So the ability to perceive that scale comparison is fairly limited, and again it's a minor size compared to other key features and foci within the landscape. Well, I don't see what those other key features and foci are.
Well, the key features here in this particular landscape is probably going to be the Hill of Fair. We're going to disagree about that. But we can come back to that when we look at the photomontage. This last passage in this document to take you to is 341. Wind farms, because of their very nature and typical location of their open landscape, often become major focal points. Do you not accept that this wind farm will become a major focal point?
Will have a major effect from some locations.
Mr. Ferber, would it become a major focal point?
Well, I think
I can understand your reluctance to answer,
because
but please
it's a very general question.
No, it's not. It's a very specific question, Mr. Ferber. Will these wind turbines become a major focal point in the landscape?
But to the extent that any wind farm would be, then quite possibly.
Okay. We note your reluctance to give a straight answer to a straight question, Mr. Ferber. That's all I wanted to deal with under...
Mr. Finley, that was a fairly straight answer. The answer to your question.
We can debate that in due course. Moving on, the next section is going to be looking at landscape character. And just so that people have it open in advance, I was going to borrow from Ms. Platt's documentation her figure 1 to have open whilst I go to other documents. So it's CD 16.1, or it's going to be 016001, and it's electronic page 19 of 29 in that document. And what you should have there is a focused, and this is so Mr. Trinick and the witness can get it out too, a focused in spotlight on the various landscape character type areas. And the grey area, as I understand it, but we'll confirm this after lunch, is in effect recording what is stated to be the case in the EIAR. But I will be looking at other documents as well as this, but in order to relate it to what's on the ground, you may find it helpful to do it by reference to this plan. Ma'am, would that be a convenient moment to stop for lunch?
Yes, thank you very much. So we'll come back at 2:10, please. Do his cross-examination.
So, sorry, the date's the same, but you've just got the day of the week.
Yeah, it's the 22nd and 29th, but it's Mondays, not Fridays.
I was hoping you made a mistake with the date. We have a bit more time.
Okay, Mr. Findlay.
Thank you. Mr. Ferber, could we turn then to chapter 6 of the, briefly, chapter 6 of the EIAR, which is CD 1.12 or 001.012. And I want to take you to a passage at 6.5.3.9, which 6.5.3.9, which is on electronic page 12 of 60. Let me know when you're there, Mr. Ferber.
Yeah.
Great. You'll see what it says. The topography of the site is characterised as a narrow upland plateau flanked by hill slopes and extensive forest plantation, forming a notable topographical feature experienced in many views from the wider surrounding low-lying landscape. Given what you said earlier about the EIAR, I presume we're agreed that that is an appropriate description.
Yeah, I think the narrow upland plateau, as opposed to ridge, is broadly accurate.
Okay, and then just similar wording, but if we go to, that was 6.5.39, if we go to 6.5.55, which is on the following electronic page, rather picks up the point that you've just made. The site comprises a narrow open moorland ridge that forms a notable landscape feature seen in many views from the lower lying agricultural landscapes that surround it. Suggests that it could either be seen as a plateau or a ridge.
I don't really agree with that comment about it being a ridge.
So you disagree with this description here?
That one word.
Yeah. And then just on to see if we move on in the document, where there's a similar broad description to 6.10.5, which is electronic page 57, you'll see we go back to plateau.
Yes, I see that, yes.
So, but whether it's a plateau or a ridge, it's a narrow plateau, would you not agree?
No, I don't agree that it's a narrow ridge.
No, I didn't put a narrow ridge, I said a narrow plateau. Particularly when it's north, if you're looking north to south, I mean, it's a lozenge shape, or
Trapezoid.
so, but from between north and south, it's a fairly narrow plateau, if we're going to use the word plateau. I'm not particularly hung up on ridge or plateau.
I don't think that that narrow is the correct term.
So you disagree with the use of the word narrow in 6.10.5,
Yep.
notwithstanding you told us earlier you didn't, it seems to be quite an important point, you didn't disagree with anything as far as I was concerned, leaving aside residential visual amenity in the, and let's just go back to those earlier paragraphs, 6.5.55, you disagree with narrow open moorland ridge, and in 6.5.39 you now disagree, where I don't think you did beforehand, with narrow upland plateau.
There's the narrow part and the ridge part that I disagree with in the description.
Well, I suggest to you that the EIAR is plainly and obviously correct. And the reason that you're having difficulty is because you bear in mind the guidance that I put to you before lunch in paragraph 3.29 of Siting and Design, which for the reporter's note is CD 1010 or 010010, which says narrow bands of uplands between settled and small-scale valleys should be avoided. It's clearly a narrow bit of upland. You know, blindingly obvious, isn't it?
No, it depends how you what you define as narrow, doesn't it? I don't think narrow in the context of 6 kilometres is in terms of 6 kilometre depth is accurate.
Well, we note your disagreement with the authors of the EIAR. If we go to page 20 of 60, you'll see the landscape character sensitivity table, and for Grampian outliers, which is where we are, the values susceptibility and indeed sensitivity are all high, and that's a matter of agreement, I understand.
Yes.
I want to look at that and the sensitivity, that's the sensitivity of the Grampian outliers. By reference to the plan or diagram, figure, my apologies, that I referred to before we adjourned for lunch, I want to look at the various adjoining landscape character types, and starting with LCT 26, which is wooded estates, which on the figure 1, as Platt's figure 1, is LCT 19 central wooded estates. They're one and the same thing. And I want to do that first by going, and I'm going to do this with a number of documents, first by going to CD 8.6, so that is 008.006, which is the September 23 landscape sensitivity assessment. And that has 118 pages, and I think we find wooded estates at electronic page 82 of 118. Let me know when you're there.
I am.
Right, we can see at the bottom of the entry that 2 paragraphs for the character description. The last sentence says, the prominent outlying hills and ridges landscape character type provides a backdrop with moorland spurs forming dark ridges across the skyline, contrasting with the green lowlands. Now, just looking at the map and knowing the geography of the areas we do, there will be more than one bit of outlying hill and ridge, but certainly one of those will be the Hill of Fare.
Yeah.
Grateful. And then key sensitivities for consideration, if we go to page 84 of 118, so that's 2 pages on, see under conclusions, sensitivity to wind turbines in that area is heightened with proximity to outlying hills and ridges, LCT, to the west. Now, I suggest to you that what that is conveying in part is that the junction between that landscape character type and the LCT type of which Hill of Fare forms part is a sensitive boundary. Do you accept that?
I don't think it's, it's talking about boundaries in particular. It's making a general comment on sensitivity.
Okay. If we just turn back to Chapter 6 of the LVIA and look to the conclusions on this aspect, it's at 6649, which is on electronic page 22 of 60.
Yes.
Says the proposed development would introduce a large scale of change with up to all of 16 turbines visible on the hillside that forms the visual backdrop to many views from this LCT. This would introduce a high magnitude of change, moderate effect, significant effect extending to approximately 5 kilometres from the proposed development, with a notable area to the east site entrance where effects would be more limited. And I think that's a matter you've also drawn attention to in your report.
Yeah.
And then over the page beyond 5 kilometres, but up between 5 and 7, reading short, there will be a significant effect.
That's correct.
So you're, from that area, you're getting out to 7 kilometres.
That's correct.
Then that's what I want to do with LCT 26. If we then go to LCT 27, which on the figure 1 is the Cromer uplands, and go back to the 2023 study, and which is CD 8.6, and go to electronic page 85 of 18, it's the next page. I think it's Farmed Moorland Edge, it's called, and we can see there are a number of those, and one of them lies adjacent to the Hill of Fare. And if we look down that page, and the second paragraph under key sensitivities for consideration, in the second sentence says, views focus on pronounced hills of the surrounding uplands which backdrop the LCT. The transitional nature of the LCT heightens sensitivity intrusion from wind turbines, and then careful sighting, etc. Now, we have to be careful because the uplands there will not only be the Grampian outliers, but it will also be the uplands to the further west, won't it?
Yeah.
But there's still sensitivity there between the Hill of Fare and the Cromer uplands.
I think that's recognised in the sensitivity assessment that was undertaken.
Okay. Grateful. And then if we go back to Chapter 6 of the LVIA, we pick up the conclusions on that at 660, 6.6.60 and 6.6.61 on electronic page 23 of 60. And you're going to have a high magnitude of change, I'm summarising, up to 5 kilometres, and a moderate significant effect between 5 and 7 kilometres to the west.
That's correct.
Thank you. Then the next, I'm just taking them in LCT number order, is LCT 28, which are the Grampian outliers. Now that includes the Hill of Fare, but there are 3 other potential outliers which are So if I can take you back to CD 8.6 and go to, first of all, to electronic page 88 of outlying hills and ridges, because it covers all three.
Yes.
Again, key sensitivities for consideration are set out in on the first page of page 88. There's a passage in the second paragraph that the distinctive landform of dramatic outcrops. Now, you touched on that with Mr. Trinick in evidence in chief. I'm not going to go back through that. We can see what's there, and indeed what the EIAR has said about the feature of the Hill of Fare. But it's the last sentence I want to pick up. The hill settings and views from summits are sensitive to visual intrusion. Now that applies to all the elements of LCT 22, doesn't it? Sorry, LCT 28. My apologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies according to exactly where you are and which hill and which direction you're looking in. But as a general comment, I wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, and then just to note over the page at page 89, there's guidance on the very large turbines, which will category, and the very large turbine category, which we'll come to in more detail in a moment. And then the conclusions on electronic page 90 of 118, that it's a high-quality, high-value landscape sensitive to erosion of character from wind energy development of all scales beyond the domestic height turbine. In terms of sensitivity, do you agree with that?
I mean, it provides a general sort of sensitivity. It doesn't provide a prescriptive sensitivity in relation to an individual landscape and visual impact assessment, because that's a separate exercise.
Absolutely, but I'm just asking about the generality. And indeed, I think the point you've made is a point Miss Anderson has expressly accepted in her evidence, that it's only a starting point, this. But
yes.
I'm just wondering whether we can agree the starting point.
As a general comment, that's correct.
I'm grateful. So if we go back to chapter 6 and pick up the various parts of that which are relevant, if we go to back to electronic page 23 of 60, and at 6.6.63, we're talking about the unit of Grampian outliers located 6.3 kilometres to the northwest of the proposed development.
Yes.
So on this map, on the figure that we have, that's the one in the top left corner, towards the top left corner. And then if we go over the page, so that's electronic page 24, to paragraph 6.6.65, we can see that it's an agreed major moderate significant effect out to 8.5 kilometres. Do you see that?
Yes.
Just a small point on your report. If you pick up your report, which is CD 13.41, and turn to paragraph 3.12, which is a conclusion paragraph. In the fourth bullet point, you have 6.3 kilometres to the northwest, whereas that in fact should read 8.5, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think that would be accurate. I think what that is indicating is the position of the boundary of the LCT.
Yes, I think that's what's happened. You've juxtaposed the boundary with the effect. Yeah. Just to thank you. The second area of relevance, if we go back to chapter 6, is in terms of LCT 22 is the mouth, and that begins at 6.6.71. And we can see that roughly...
Sorry, could you just refer me back to which document are you looking at?
It's CD 1.12 in your and my language, or 001.012 in... I'm going to hazard a EPA speak.
Sorry, the paragraph reference.
Sorry, is 6.6.74 is the one I want to take you to, but you'll see where we are.
Yes.
And again, just reading short, hang on, I may have got to the wrong... Yes. Yes, no, that's right. Within approximately 10 kilometres in the north-facing slopes, the proposed development would have a moderate significant effect.
That's correct. Yeah.
And we can see that shown on the plan. And if we go back to your 3.12, I think you've omitted this from your summary. So 3.12 of your report. Sorry, my apologies. You haven't. You've got it. It's the next one you've omitted. But can we? So I don't have to go back to it. If you've got 3.12, you've got the outlying hills and ridges to the northwest and the mouth. What you don't have is the third aspect of Grampian outliers, where Scolty Hill is.
Yeah. Which
is omitted from 3.12. If we go back to the EIAR, still electronic page 24 of 60, that begins at 6676, and the my apologies, not that one. It's that's where I've gone wrong. It's the one 6668, in fact, I should be taking you to. Do you have that? My apologies.
So the paragraph
6668.
Yes.
And I think the unit, that the reference to 6.4 kilometres to the south is the, if I can call it, the Grampian outlier that has Scolty Hill on it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And we can see it at the end of paragraph 6670 that there's a significant effect on to 9 kilometres.
Yes.
And that is the one that's omitted from your 3.12.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally the conclusion is that its significant landscape character effects would be experienced out to 10 kilometres.
Again, I just wanted to, I'm grateful you accepted that, should be in your 3.12.
Yeah.
And then we have LCT 33, which is the broad-wooded valley with estates, which on figure 1 is LCT 25. If we go to CD 8.6 at electronic page 103, you should have broad-wooded valley with estates.
Yes.
And if you scroll to the bottom of that page 103, it says this LCT is externally sensitive to visual encroachment from turbines in adjacent LCTs along the edges of the valleys.
Yes.
And just see if there's anything further there. I think that's all from there. If we go back to the chapter 6, and we need to slightly go back. Hang on. We need to go to electronic page. Just give me a moment. Got that wrong. Sure, just trying to find, I'm not sure it's there somewhere. Sorry, yes, it's 6.53 on electronic page 23,
Yes.
and the relevant paragraph is 6.654, a high magnitude of change and a major moderate effect out to 7 kilometres.
Yes.
And are you happy that the various indications of where there is significant impacts are broadly correctly shown on Ms. Platt's figure 1?
Just bring that up, please. I think the Grampian Outliers extension wouldn't go out to 10 to the south. And also I have an issue with the fact that the area's sort of shaded, which would indicate that significant effects would be experienced from all of the area, which isn't the case. But I accept in terms of general limits.
Yeah.
It's
It's a figurative plan, and
Yeah.
there will be elements in that, and I've already accepted with you, for instance, that there's an element of land at the end of the Hill of Fare, which may not be as significantly affected as other areas, but grateful. We can put that away then, I think, that figure, and what I want to turn to now is CD 8.7, which is 008.007, which is the appendix to the document we've just been looking at. And what I want to go to is the assessment for landscape character type 28, outlying hills and ridges, which is found at electronic page 160 of 217. Now, we could spend some time going through this, but it as it does with every other character type, gives assessment of the impact of very large turbines or large and very large turbines down to small and medium turbines.
in a generic way.
In a generic way, accept that. Do you accept that in a generic way all these are reasonably applicable to Hill of Fare, subject to detailed analysis?
Well, I think they're a starting point, as we've agreed before, but in terms of looking at sensitivity.
I just but the outcome, whether it's generic or not, is equivalent to the EIAR's assessment for Hill of Fare, is that it has a high sensitivity.
That was the conclusion that was reached, taking into account, the site-specific circumstances.
So the site-specific and the generic tend to agree that the sensitivity is high.
They do in terms of the study area, yes.
Thank you. Just give me a moment to check the reference. Yeah, if we could turn to electronic page 163 of 217. Sorry, 163 of 217. So still in 87, yeah. Do you have that?
I do.
Yes, so if you look in the left-hand box, this is looking at aspects of sensitivity by relation to development. Although relatively sparsely settled, the distinctive topography and landscape, rich with historic cultural meaning, increases its susceptibility to development of wind turbines, which at this scale would excessively dominate and visually intrude the skyline. In generic terms, are you content with that assessment too?
No, not really. I don't think that you can reach that conclusion without looking at a specific development proposal.
Well, I hear what you say. I don't leave the reporter to consider that. I don't want to spend further time in that document. Could we then go back to your report, please, at 3.9? And at 3.9, what you're running through here are the key characteristics of LCT 28 as identified by Nature Scott in CD 10.1.
That's correct.
Now, we don't need to turn CD 10.1 up because you have extracted every single key characteristic in bold. For the first one, it's long and often narrow undulating ridges punctuated with occasional pronounced hills which stand proud of surrounding low-lying farmland. Now, Hill of Fare is one of the narrower units of LCT 28, is it not? I think that where Scolter Hill is even narrower, but Hill of Fare is one of the narrower units, is it not?
In terms of depth, I would. It does vary quite a bit.
So I suggest, consistent with your other answers, you would disagree that this is a narrow undulating ridge.
The word narrow is relative to what? Relative to 100 kilometres width of moorland? Well, it would be relatively narrow, but I don't accept the description as being a narrow undulating ridge. I don't think that's an accurate description.
Well, you don't seem to take issue with that description anywhere in your report, do you?
No, I don't, because I'm just basically responding. I'm not critiquing each of the key characteristics because they apply to the wider character area. What I'm doing is responding to each of those key characteristics with my analysis, which refers to rounded peaks and pulling turbines back from the edge of the plateau. So I'm not referring to narrow ridges.
So how would you describe the proposal as responding to Hill of Fare, which clearly stands proud of surrounding low-lying farmland?
Well, it's an agreement in the, well, it's in the landscape statement of agreed matters that we have adopted mitigation approaches to mitigate effects. Miss Anderson doesn't think that that's been successful, but the fact is that there has been mitigation to mitigate those effects, and that is outlined at section 6.7 of the chapter, of the landscape chapter.
Right, well, the extent to which there's the mitigation is at all significant, we can agree to disagree about that, but and we'll look at that when we look at the photo montages in a moment. I'm going to try and take these reasonably briefly. B, do you accept that Hill of Fare is a local landmark?
Yeah, I do, and I've gone on to say that it's recognised as a local landmark, but it's not of regional or national significance.
No, and no one has suggested otherwise to you. Under C, you note that this is a broadly accurate description, noting that these are typical features of upland sites that accommodate wind farms in Scotland. And I just want to pick up that comment together with the comment you make at 412 of your report, where you refer to the Clash and Darrick 2 wind farm decision. Have you been to Clash and Darrick?
No, I haven't, but I did have some involvement in it because my ex-colleague Rebecca Rylott was involved in that appeal.
Yeah. So I won't ask. You haven't been there. The comments you make on it are by reference to the reporter's updated report. Even when you look at that updated report, which for your note is CD 13.13, and I'm going to ask this generically, she deals with description of landscape impacts at 253 to paragraphs 253 to 280, perhaps up to 290. But the landscape setting there was quite different to the landscape setting here, would you not accept? Even from a mere reading of that report.
Well, I think that there are different. Of course, there are differences. Every site's different.
I said quite different.
Well, no, I think that the host landscape type was the same. This is in the Grampian Outliers.
I said the landscape. I didn't. I'm obviously accepting that the host landscape character type is the same, and that's why you've raised it, and that's why I'm asking you about it. But the circumstances and the impact of the wind farm were entirely different in landscape terms. For instance, there wasn't a significant impact on a host of surrounding landscape character types.
Well,
with sensitive interfaces between them and the landscape character type in which the wind farm was situated.
Yeah, but the point of raising it as an example was to say that there has been wind energy development consented in this landscape character type.
Well, as a matter of fact, that would be difficult to dispute, however much it pains me, as I had a positive report from the reporter before NPF4 came out. But I'll put my violin away and move on to paragraph D. In paragraph D, you say, this is back to your paragraph 3.9, there'll be no impact on intensively managed farmland as the result of the proposed development. I presume what you mean by that is no direct impact. There would be an indirect impact because there's an indirect landscape impact.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just check that paragraph number again?
Paragraph D in 3.9D. So there would be an indirect impact. Then E, you say there is a communication mast within the site. And there's also a reference to other land farms. Hang on. Just pick up. Thank you. Don't want to ask you further about that. I'm not going to ask you about important prehistoric and cultural heritage. G, spectacular views across the surrounding lowlands of Aberdeenshire from these promontories. You say that panoramic views are available from the Hill of Fare and other peaks within the site. Could we go to, or back to CD 2.9, which you went to with Mr. Trinick this morning? This is the updated panoramic view from in the EIAR, so it's 002.009.
Are we looking at the photo montage or?
I'm asking you to look at page 3 of 3, yeah. The reason it was updated was to include the tracks and the both battery storage and solar material in the bottom left. But do you have that?
Yes, I do.
So, whilst a panoramic view would still be available from viewpoint 10, that it will have, in this direction at least, be very significantly changed, indeed dominated by the wind farm, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, there will be a major adverse effect, but what I would add to that is that what is in terms of the key characteristics, is the views across the surrounding lowlands, and in this location, you're not looking to the lowlands, you're just, your view is curtailed by the landform of the Hill of Fare itself, so
But
that wouldn't really be affected.
The panoramic view that you would get from Meikle Tap, which I think this is, will, if you were to go there currently, comprise both the view, the general view that you can see in this photo montage, and also the lowlands.
In other directions, yeah, facing away from the wind farm.
And if it wasn't so cloudy, you would no doubt see the Grampians behind them.
I think that's a bit of a stretch, to be honest, but
But your comment in paragraph G of your statement is not just panoramic views to the lowlands, it's panoramic views. The wind farm, I'd suggest to you, will certainly in this direction dominate those panoramic views, and it will ensure that the hill of Fare itself ceases to be the single most important defining characteristic, but the wind farm would be an equally key characteristic from that viewpoint.
I don't agree. I think that when you see turbines against the sky, and that sky, there isn't a landscape that you're perceiving beyond that, then the landform itself, the solidity of that, the darkness of it, the forestry, is going to continue to be the key characteristic. It's not being removed. That's not to say that the addition of the turbines wouldn't be major adverse as additional elements in the view, but I don't agree with Miss Anderson that the turbines would, would completely dominate or overwhelm. That isn't a description that I agree with.
I think she said Nestle overwhelmed. She's suggested it's going to be an equally key characteristic. So it's not overwhelming, it's becoming an equal characteristic. So please don't overstate Ms Anderson's position. The last question I want to ask you about this is on I. You say that the site doesn't have a wild landscape character. Now, we can agree it's not wild land, but if you go back to Chapter 6 of the EIAR, which is CD 1.12, and to electronic page 13,
Yes.
under 6.5.57, although the site exhibits some perceptions of remoteness and tranquility, it is strongly influenced by its proximity to other moderating influences. Now that's a fair description, because a bigger area of LCT 22 would have more remote or tranquil characteristics, but because Hill of Fare is so intimately associated with other landscape character types, those are moderated.
I don't think it's the proximity to other landscape character types. I think it's the proximity to other, human infrastructure, including operational wind turbines to the north, evidence of man's influence.
Surely the moderating influences here are the well-farmed and heavily populated low-lying areas that surround.
I think that's a selective view. I think that it's the combination of all of the man-made elements that have led to that conclusion.
Just pick up one reference. Yes, if you could go back just on this question of wildness and remoteness to CD 8.7, which we're looking at 008.007, at electronic page 167 of 217. In the left-hand column under landscape value,
So I'm just looking at which does this apply to the host?
this is the same section I'd taken you to earlier, which has Grampian outlines. So it covers all Grampian outlines.
Sorry, electronic page.
Electronic page 167.
Thank you.
If you look in the left-hand column, second bullet point on that page, you'll see the words, the SLA designations emphasise landscape qualities that provide high scenic value, strong landscape identity, sense of place and naturalness. Qualities of wildness and remoteness are also a feature. Again, generically, do you accept that?
But the site isn't, it's not within the SLA, it's some distance from it. And I think we are in agreement, myself and Miss Anderson, that in terms of the impact upon the integrity of the SLA, there wouldn't be a material effect as a result of the proposals. There would be some adverse impacts upon views from the edges of the designation, but the SLA itself, in terms of the River Dee, is a completely different character type to the site itself.
Yes, I mean, perhaps if you scroll down in that to the next page, and you'll see at the bottom, page 168, perceptual qualities of undeveloped landscape, strong sense of remoteness, indivisibly linked to scenic upland areas. Do you accept those perceptual qualities are evident, at least in part, on Hill of Fare?
Yeah, I think what is apparent is that within that table, if you follow on from that table, it talks about specific places within the sort of landscape character type. At no point does it mention the Hill of Fare when it talks about specific places like Sculty Hill, hill forts, ancient monuments, landmarks, Clachnabon, Benaki, Tapham North. No point is in these more sort of valuable elements of the designation. At no point is Hill of Fare mentioned.
I know it's not, and I wasn't putting to you whether it's got hill forts on it or itself, and you may not be aware there's real importance to Clan Strawn, who Clachnabon being their, I think, war cry as they went into battle. So Commander Strawn told us at the last inquiry I sat in here. But I was asking about perceptual qualities, and I was asking you whether the Hill of Fare had them. So got a chance to answer that question, otherwise I'm going to move on.
No, I mean, it's just at a lower level than is present in other parts of that landscape character type.
And how many of the other parts of the landscape character type have you been to?
Well, I've been to all of the viewpoints, so those cover a fair proportion of the area.
I think those viewpoints encompass the 4 landscape areas of landscape character that I've asked you about already.
Yeah, and I think
they obviously extend far greater extent over Aberdeenshire, don't they?
yeah, I mean, I think the relationship.
So you can't generalise because you haven't.
Well, exactly. I mean, in terms of perceptual qualities, because that was the question. In terms of the link to the scenic upland areas, including the Cairngorms, well, that's much more perceptible because of proximity and visibility from Sculty than it is from Hill of Fare. And obviously, the reporter will see that from our own site visits, come to our own conclusions. But it is the Hill of Fare isn't. It got that the same linkage to those scenic upland areas, including the Cairngorms National Park.
Okay, well, I disagree with you about that, but that's a matter the reporter can form a view on. In 3.8 of your report, you refer to, you're dealing here with reduced visibility of the extent of wind farm. Now, could I take you to CD 1.63063, which is figure 618.
Yes.
Just wait to the report. Great. Well, this is showing slightly zeroed out similar information in terms of landscape character types that we were looking at earlier, but this is showing you where how many turbine blade tips are visible. And what one can see here is the area of white land, if I can call it that, to the immediate east of Hill of Fare bears out your point that there's an area, how sizable it is, we can gloss over for the moment, where you won't see any blade tips because they'll be masked by the hill itself.
Yeah, and just reminding everybody that this is a theoretical visibility, it's bare earth, so it's not taking into account any intervening features in the landscape.
Absolutely. But then, as there's an element of screening if you're immediately close to the Hill of Fare, but the further you get away, the more turbines you're going to see. And once you're 2 or 3 kilometres away, I think it's, and certainly by the time you're 5 kilometres away, for most of the circumference, you're going to see them all.
Well, in theory, subject to where the receptors are, which at that distance are mostly minor roads.
And just, don't need to go to it, but similar information about hub heights is given on, just for your note, on figure 6.6, which is CD 151.051. What I want to do now, coming towards the end of cross-examination, towards the end, don't want people to get too carried away. I want to ask you about some viewpoints, so I don't forget it. Viewpoint, I think the only viewpoint on which there is specific disagreement between you and Ms Anderson is viewpoint 9.
Yes.
So, primarily going to be a matter for the reporters. I think that is CD 1.129, but people may be working off hard copies.
Yes.
Right, I'll just wait till my assistant gets me to. She might hit me if I called her my glamorous assistant.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Thank you. No, that's and the photo. Yeah, so we can take into account the wireline, but I'm going to go to the photo montage. Now, what we're assessing at the viewpoint is the view you get from the viewpoint. Can I say that if you're assessing the impact on a particular road over the length of the road, then you've got to take into account a number of other factors, such as the length of the road at which you, from which
I disagree. I think if you're assessing a viewpoint where you can stand and appreciate the view, then that's a different matter to somewhere where, in reality, the routes from this, the road at this point, there isn't a footway, so somebody's not going to pause and appreciate that view. So
if you're the passenger in a car, that's the view you will get.
Yeah, so the magnitude of change doesn't just encompass what's on this page. It has to take into account the geographical area over which that is experienced. It can't be a snapshot because you're not parachuted in a car to this location. You experience it as part of a route assessment.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with your approach to methodology there, but
it's an approach that's backed up in the clarifications to Glivia document, which is moving away from a specific viewpoint assessment where that isn't the key issue.
Well, I think the LVIA provides a specific viewpoint assessment for this viewpoint, doesn't it?
Yes, but the viewpoint assessment has to, as I said, has to take into account if you're standing at a location and appreciating that view, or whether you're experiencing it for like 1 or 2 seconds when you're passing a hedgerow and then the view's screened again. Well, so your magnitude is moderated by how you experience the view.
I think you are diminishing the impact by taking that approach, Mr. Ferber, but I'm very happy to leave that for the reporter to judge. But let me put the question this way. If you were able to stand and take in this view, would you accept that there was a significant impact?
Yeah, it could potentially be if that was a route where there was a footpath and you could take in that view, then quite possibly it would be.
So in terms of viewpoint 9, it may be for the reporter to judge the approach and the impact, but we've narrowed it down in your. It's because of the nature of the viewer that you say it's not significant.
Yeah, and that approach is supported by best practice guidance.
Well, sure, I accept that, but I will. I don't want to waste more time on that viewpoint. The other specific disagreement with Ms Anderson is her suggestion that along the Slug Road there's a significant impact. And again, we don't have a visualisation to show that, but that's a matter the reporter can judge on site.
That's right, yes.
Thank you. Then if we go to viewpoint, having got those out of the way, if we go to viewpoint 2, which is CD 1.22, and here we are in the village of Echt. And again, for the sake of time, I'm going to take you to the photo montage. Do you not accept that the turbines, I'm not criticising the photography, but they're quite difficult against a blue sky to see their full height, but the turbines are far from forming a minor are far from being of minor vertical scale compared to other key features in the landscape, are they?
I mean, I think if you look at the landform at the highest point in that view, I would say that you could describe it as relatively minor or moderate. I mean, it's a significant effect. We conclude that. But in terms of comparing turbines with landform and vertical scale, I think we've described before that's problematic because of the slimline nature of turbines and the fact that you've got rotating turbine. You don't directly compare the height of the turbine with the height of landform, particularly where it's fairly sort of dark and solid and you're seeing the turbines against the sky.
Oh, well, I'd suggest to you that those turbines clearly diminish the scale of the hill of Fare significantly.
Well, I don't agree.
Okay. Can we go on to viewpoint 4 then, please? Which is CD 1.124 for those following it electronically. And again to the... what we're looking at here is fields that are effectively rolling up the side of Hill of Fare, and then you get some trees and then the heather on the top.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, I missed the viewpoint number for the hard
4.
copy.
Again, I suggest to you that the turbines here very clearly diminish the scale of the hill, and it would be quite proper to suggest that they are as equally as important defining characteristic as the hill itself.
I think that the contrast with some of the elements in the view, particularly the sort of straw bales and the sort of the overhead lines on poles, obviously there is more of a difference in scale with those elements. In terms of the landform itself, it's a fairly simple landform and it stretches more than the length of the view that we've got in front of us. So I think by seeing them against the sky and being the lower parts of the towers being screened by the landform, I don't come to that conclusion.
Well, do you want to go back to the first sheet A? Gives you a better view. The turbines, in fact, dominate a large proportion of the landform, do they not?
No, I don't accept that.
Okay. Viewpoint 5, please, which is the next viewpoint. And here you say, and ma'am, for your note, it's 3.27 in Mr. Ferber's report, that the proposed development would be seen by its narrowest lateral extent with turbines the eastern end of the array partially screened by the landform. And we can see that from the wire line.
Yeah.
But I think this is looking from the west eastwards, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
And what you are seeing there is the turbines in effect sat upon the top of the, it's a narrow ridge or plateau, I'm not going to, on almost the whole of that plateau, if you like, or ridge, whichever you want to call it.
I don't accept that at all. I think the central part, obviously, where the turbines are taller, you can appreciate that those, but either side of them, you were seeing the blades only because they're located over the hill, or on the plateau, but further back. And I think if you look at, I mean, the best comparison that I can give to this view would be very helpful if I could answer it with reference to one of the documents, which is the design guidance at 10.
CD 1.10.
Yeah. I'm looking at PDF page 22.
Yep.
So I'm looking at my viewpoint, so we're looking at our viewpoint 5 at Torfins, and we're looking at the photograph at PDF page 22. The caption says, this wind farm relates well to neighbouring land use and maintains the distinction between agriculture, forestry and upland character. And you can see turbines on the hill with a kind of a more, it looks like grassland with coniferous forestry, and then you've got fenced off fields in the lowland with sheep. I don't see that relationship is materially different in that photo to what we have at viewpoint 5.
Well, I don't, you can't see the context of that photograph. So, by all means,
But it's one
preparation. But if I can take you back to the photo montage, the middle turbine, or the most prominent turbine, would appear to be as tall as the difference between as the base of the farmland and to the hill above.
Well, exactly as the S&H example, I don't have a particular issue with that. The proportions are about the same.
Well, I'm very concerned that you wish to draw comparisons from a photograph of a scale in the design guidance that gives you no context.
Well, it does give
and
you...
I can comment on that in closing. I want to now, you've drawn attention to it.
Could you let him finish his answer,
Well,
please?
okay.
The reason why I talk about this is that the concept of distinction and contrast and scale is subjective to a degree, and I accept that. But when there are specific examples given by the experts who are advising on wind farm design, I think that they are relevant to take notice of. And I don't agree with your point that this photograph can't be used for comparison because there isn't context. I think that there's enough context in that photograph to make sensible conclusions.
This isn't a photograph, comes in a section of the, since you wish to continue this point, section of the site design that deals with land use.
It does, yes, but it also...
And hang on, just wait until I've asked the question. The commentary has to be seen in that context, doesn't it?
But it
Between
also...
the
yes, but
agriculture, forestry and upland land uses.
but also includes landform.
The wind farm relates well to neighbouring land use and maintains the distinction between agricultural, forestry and upland character.
Upland character includes landform.
Well, I'd suggest you're taking far too much from that, and quite apart from the other aspects of the inadequacies of that photograph for the reasons that I've already indicated. If we go on to viewpoint 11, please, which is, for those following it electronically, it's CD 1.131. Again, do you not consider from that viewpoint that the wind farm would be as defining a characteristic as the hill upon which it sits?
I think it has a major adverse visual effect. Definitely.
Do you accept?
But sorry, I was going to just say that I think that arises because of the additive nature of them as a man-made feature. I don't accept that it somehow shrinks the landform. I don't think placing a slimline structure on top of landform that's seen against the sky somehow shrinks landform. I think it's an S&H concept that's been kind of used for too many years without people really understanding what that means.
That's a very serious comment. So you're challenging the S&H guidance for the first time in oral evidence, which you haven't referred to in your report. That's correct, isn't it?
No, I've referred to in my evidence that I don't think...
You haven't challenged it in your evidence?
I haven't. In my evidence, I've specifically said that I don't believe that the addition of the turbines shrinks the landform.
No, you're avoiding the question.
But
you are challenging now the S&H guidance. Are you? Well, let me ask you more openly. Are you challenging the S&H guidance? I'm
challenging the use of some of the terminology that's been applied from the S&H guidance without thought to the context of it.
It's the first time you've done it, is in your oral evidence under cross-examination. Do you think that's fair notice?
No, I've just said that in relation to the points that you're raising, the issue of where that phrase came from was originally came from S&H guidance, and a lot of practitioners have used it in a lazy way. They haven't actually really analysed what that means in relation to specific photos or specific views.
You say a lot of practitioners have used that in a lazy way. If I remember correctly, this is your first wind farm inquiry in Scotland. Do you use that guidance elsewhere?
Yes.
But they may be using it in a lazy way in England and Wales, but have you got any evidence that's used in a lazy way in Scotland? Could we then go to, well, I think it was viewpoint 11. We looked at viewpoint 11. Thank you. Just two more points. You have, in your report at 6.4 to 6.12, reached conclusions on a number of, if I call it for shorthand, Hoffrig viewpoints. And my understanding is that your assessment there is not a point assessment, but is an assessment as part of a route assessment. Is that correct? Because the references you've given to the EIAR are to route assessment.
No, it depends on the context of the viewpoint. So, viewpoint 1 from Cannon Mount, obviously you walk off the road to get to it, and you experience that from... So that's
I should have
different.
ruled... There's no dispute between... Miss Anderson has looked at these, between her and you on viewpoint 1, or indeed viewpoint 8, Miller Tap, or indeed Scolty Hill.
Yep.
But Scolty Hill you're looking at as part of a walk, as I understand it, rather than a...
No, but it's a viewpoint because you stop at the top and you appreciate the view, so it is relevant.
But in terms of, well, in terms of viewpoints 3 and 5, yeah, 3, 5 and 6, I think. Sorry, 3 and 6. You found a significant impact at viewpoint 5. Are they location viewpoints, or are they more in the context of, I think, viewpoint 9, which we discussed a moment or two ago?
But it depends on the context that you experience them in. So if you experience... So there are viewpoints that... Yeah.
So it's viewpoint 3 and 6 I'm asking about. Are your descriptions of non-significance there based on someone standing at the viewpoint or someone experiencing that view as part of a route?
Yeah, the latter.
Latter.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, there may not be too much disagreement. Miss Anderson would say if you were standing or just considering viewpoints 3 and 6, there would be a significant impact. Would you dispute that?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So if you go through the same hypothetical exercise as I asked you to do at viewpoint 9, if you were simply standing at viewpoints 3 and 6, would you accept that there would be, or could be, a significant impact at those viewpoints?
Yeah, I think that if there was a footway and there was the ability to pause and take in the view, that there's the potential for that to be the case. But it's a hypothetical situation.
Okay, well, not sure I agree about that, but we've narrowed the dispute and it can be a matter for the reporter, and I put that to you. I then want to finish with, by going to your report at 5.2, you quote from Nature Scott there. Do you see that?
Yes.
But Nature Scott actually produced an earlier response, pre-scoping response, and which is at CD 1.167. And I'd like to ask you to go to that. And
That's CD 1.167.
yes. And I think, let me just double check. The electronic page number is 79 of 97.
Yes, thank
So under appraisal of landscape and visual effects, it says the proposal will be located in a prominent elevated position, which it would be, wouldn't it? I think we've agreed that.
yeah.
Resulting in a likely significant adverse and landscape visual effects across an area of Aberdeenshire with a number of sensitivities, and we've looked at those sensitivities.
Yes, we have.
The design and scale of the development in relation to the receiving hill of Fare is a key issue. The proposed development, as currently described in the scoping document, is contrary to our wind farm siting design guidance due to the scale, size and scale of the turbines in relation to the underlying hill of Fare. Now, we have to remember in reading that the scoping document had 250-metre turbines. The hill of Fare at only 471 metres is a relatively small hill, yet still a prominent landmark in this part of Aberdeenshire. Do you agree it's a prominent landmark?
It's a local landmark and it's prominent in some views, yes, but not in all views, in all directions. But, yeah.
In many views and many directions, I would say. Turbines at the size and scale proposed could dominate.
Do you want to put that point to him, or is it,
Yes.
are
Do
you giving
you
evidence?
accept that it's prominent in many
Thank you.
views and many directions?
No.
Well, I suggest to you that simply doesn't accord with reality, Mr. Ferber. I'm glad for Mr. Trinick raising the point. Turbines at the size and scale proposed could dominate the area, resulting in a range of significant adverse effects. I'd suggest to you that is true, as true of 200-metre turbines as it would be of 250-metre turbines.
Well, obviously, the range of effects or the severity of effects or the level of effects is all different. I mean, the way that SNH, Nature Scott are responding to this is potential. So it says that it could dominate the area. So they're highlighting sensitivities and they're highlighting issues.
Thank you, Mr. Ferber. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take a break until 3:45.
Can I ask you if you want me to start this afternoon or wait until the morning?
I'm
Speaking to the reporter, sorry, my machine is on, but it's showing green. So I don't know what that means.
We'll look at that in the break.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Campbell was asking whether he should start his cross-examination this
Yeah,
afternoon
sorry.
or tomorrow. I'm happy for you to start this afternoon.
Okay. And I can't guarantee to finish in half an hour.
No, well, shall we carry on till...
I'm thinking of Mr. Ferber.
Yeah.
I'm fine to go on.
No, I'm sorry.
You're happy?
I didn't ask you a question. I just told you I'm thinking about it.
I'll ask Mr. Ferber a question. So we aim to finish at 4, but we have some days gone on till about a little bit longer. So is 4:30 maybe the latest we should?
Okay, I'm not dodging the cross-examination, but Mr. Ferber will be in Perda. Mr. Ferber will be in Perda if I start. If I don't start, he won't be. So it's Mr. Trigg.
Well, no, you will be in Perda anyway. You're in cross-examination.
We'll be in Perda
It's-
either way.
Makes no difference.
Different rules, but that's all right. Okay.
Okay, so we'll start back at 1:45 and go on till at the latest 4:30, but we can stop earlier if people need to.
There we go. Definitely something like this. I'm sorry. He seems to have been asleep.
And Mr. Campbell is going to begin his cross-examination.
Ma'am, thank you. Mr. Ferber, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please don't bother turning to look at me, Mr. Ferber.
Okay.
The reporter heard what you said. Normally you'd be on that side of the room, but we're not doing that today. So I wonder if you take up your recognition and inquiry report. You probably have them in front of you already. Could I start by asking you some questions, please, about the extent of your involvement in this case? You tell us in your recognition you've been involved since May this year.
That's right.
That's right, is it?
Yes.
Because a colleague went off ill.
Yeah, on long-term sick.
Yeah. Now, we know that your inquiry report was lodged in July this year, which is a couple of months after May. You don't need to turn and look at me,
Yep,
please don't
that's
worry. That's right, isn't it? Lloyd?
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking you this is the properties of the document, when examined on a computer, show the name of Mr. Brian Denny.
Yeah, that was...
Can I just ask a question first, please?
Yeah.
I understand Mr. Denny to be a director of Pegasus. Is that right?
Yeah, what we commonly do when we prepare reports is we use a template report from the report that's closest to the assessment. Now, what happened is that somehow the properties within the document didn't get updated by the admin. So when the document was PDF'd, his name appeared in the title, but that's the only reason.
You told us you've been involved in since May when Mr. Denny went off sick.
No, Mr. Denny's retired, so it wasn't anything to do with the colleague who was going to take the inquiry.
I see Mr. Denny's not the colleague who went off sick.
No.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that up to an extent, although I remain mystified as to why his name should appear on the document. In the metadata of the document, you talked about a template. Surely a report is a bespoke effort by the author.
Well, it is a bespoke effort, but there are certain aspects of it, such as the sort of the titles and the way it's set out, that are the same for each report.
Is it possible that leading up to the pre-inquiry meeting in April and after that, Mr. Denny wrote the report?
No, he's been retired from the company for well over 2 years, so that just, he had no involvement in the project at all.
So is there no logical explanation for the appearance of his name?
Well, I just told you what the reason was.
Right, fine. All right, thank you. I'd like you to pick up your report now, please, and could you go to paragraph 2.26? As far as possible, I'd like to follow your order in this report with the questions that I have. At 2.26, you say the scheme design has been informed by Nature Scott's best practice, and that's a reference to siting and designing, I think.
That's correct, yeah.
That's the document 110. 010.010.
That's right. Yeah, it was in the errata. There was a correction to the reference number.
And then you've placed in I'm not sure if you're placing it in quotes or just referring to it, but you say in relation to matters including turbine size and layout composition, recognizing that every scheme is unique, it's not possible for a development to fully comply with every aspect of the guidance.
Yeah.
Now, have you, or do you say that you have, that your clients have relied on this document for their siting choices?
I think citing, there are two aspects to citing. There's selection of a site in Scotland or in Aberdeenshire or wherever it might be in geographical area, and there's also citing in terms of individual turbines. And the Nature Scott guidance deals with both matters. Citing doesn't just mean selecting a site, but if you are referring, if that's what you are referring to, I can answer the question on that basis, or...
Well, the site selection was, I think, essentially a fait accompli before you came on board.
That's yes, and that's common to the majority of schemes that we're involved in.
I'm not interested in the majority of schemes.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. Yeah.
So is the answer yes?
Yes.
Okay. And so far as Mr. Finlay, my learned friend Mr. Finlay, took you through the section in the environmental impact assessment report, showing the iteration of the layout.
Yeah.
Did Pegasus have anything to do with that? Or is that simply a rehearsal of what?
Following scoping, they did have input into it. That's my understanding, yes.
It's your understanding?
Well, it's a bit more than understanding. I think the reason why I caveat that is because I wasn't employed at the company at the time, so I didn't directly experience it. What I can go off is the sort of material that's documented within the submission. I didn't have the opportunity to speak to the colleague who was on long-term sick, which complicates things a bit more.
Just to set the time, to complete the timeline, when did you start working with Pegasus?
December 2023.
23, thank you. And where we see in paragraph 2.26 italicized text, is that a summary by you or is that a quotation from the document?
It's a summary from section 6.7 of the LVIA. So there's a section on mitigation within the LVIA, and perhaps that should have been made a bit clearer in introducing those bullet points.
So what we have here, is that your summary or simply a read across from the EIA?
Well, we can bring it up and compare it if you want, but it's...
No, I don't want to waste time on
yeah.
that. Don't you know?
Yeah, it's a summary from... it's a summary, my summary of what's contained within the EIA.
And
That's section 6.7.
Yeah, and you didn't, of course you didn't write the EIA,
Yeah.
you were not involved in it.
Yeah.
So this is your summary of somebody else's work in the EIA.
Yeah.
Thank you. You said in answer to Mr. Finlay much earlier today that he asked you some questions about site selection, and you made a reference to wind farm designers having access to, I think the word you used was systems, to help them look for sites and choose sites. And we can see that in the same section of the EIA. But what the section doesn't tell us is whether alternative sites to the Hill of Fare were considered by RES in looking for a wind farm site in Aberdeenshire. What it tells us is that they have a system which does that, but it doesn't tell us that it looked at different sites, rejected them, and chose this one. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think just for reference, at 3.2.7 of Chapter 3 of the EIAR, it describes how those alternatives were considered.
Sorry, give me that number again, would you please?
Yeah. So within, sorry, the core document reference is 001.009,
Yeah.
which is the EIA Chapter 3. Mm-hmm. And then the consideration of alternatives is on the first page at paragraph 3.27,
Yeah.
going to overleaf to 3.29.
Yeah. And that's a reference, or a quotation rather, from Planning Advice Note PAN1 of 2013, from which there's a quotation. It then tells us at 3.28 that a range of criteria is used to select sites. At 3.2.9, it talks about the main alternatives, including design, turbine spec, location, size, and scale, have been considered. What it doesn't say is that other sites were considered.
No.
That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. And just to qualify that, at 3.2.8, the reason for that is it's in relation to its commercial confidentiality. But that process would have been undertaken as it outlines there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ferber, but I can't agree that that's what 3.2.8 says. What it does is very broadly describe a site search process, which, of course, every large wind farm developer is engaged in all the time.
Yes, I think the point I was making is that for commercial reasons, the details of those alternative sites couldn't be disclosed, which is what it says.
Well, no, with respect, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say there were a number of sites investigated and this one was chosen.
Well, it does say that there were alternative sites.
Not for this case. It says the applicant is continually assessing potential onshore wind farm sites. That's not any sort of description of...
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm moving beyond my knowledge of alternatives in any event, so I don't think I can help any more with your question.
No, my point is simple. There is no evidence in this EIAR or in your report that a number of sites, named or not, were considered for this development and all were rejected except the Hill of Fare.
No, there isn't any evidence, and I was explaining the reasons why that is, but also, as it says at paragraph 3.2.7, the planning advice note doesn't expressly require the applicant to study alternatives.
Well, I know what it says, thank you.
Yeah.
But just to be clear, there is no sifting exercise described here.
It's not disclosed, no.
Well, it's not, I'm sorry to be pedantic, it's not only not disclosed, it's not described, is it?
No.
Thank you. In your inquiry report, to go back to it, 2.29, page 9,
Yes.
you have it. And you talk about enhancement there,
Yes.
and I think these are all potential site enhancements to do with things other than site selection or turbine size or spacing or layout.
That's correct.
That's correct. Thank you. When you speak in this chapter in your report about mitigation, are you confining yourself simply to consideration of the turbine lighting point, which you make at 2.2.7, or are you talking about other kinds of mitigation? Sorry, that's not a very good question. Let me put it to you another way. Just above 2.14, there's a chapter heading, Design, Evolution and Mitigation. See that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
In this chapter then, you talk about the various layouts. We won't go through that again because you did with Mr. Finlay.
Yeah.
But at 2.27, you talk about mitigation of lighting, turbine lighting.
Yes.
Is that the only mitigation that you talk about in this report?
No, it's just referring to the mitigation of the lighting, because there would have been a scheme that would have had lighting on all of the turbines, and then that would have been agreed in terms of a reduction. So it's a specific reference to the aviation lighting only, that paragraph.
What's mitigation about? What's mitigation for?
It's to minimise adverse effects.
Okay. This is one of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there are other kinds of mitigation which you might employ in respect of layout, size, positioning.
Yeah, I think
And so on.
yeah, and I think those are covered under 2.26.
Okay, that's fine. I ask these questions, which might seem a little bit pedantic, because at 235, page 11 now, in your report, it says that you consider that the final form and layout and associated infrastructure is appropriate for this site in light of the mitigation measures adopted. Now, clearly, that has nothing to do with aviation lighting, does it? That's another kind of mitigation, and I just wonder what you're talking about here in this chapter of your report.
Well, I think, yeah, that perhaps the clarification should have been added in terms of, well, final form could encompass several things, couldn't it? It could include lighting, but it's not specific.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's a conjunctive phrase, final form and layout. So you're talking about the layout of the wind farm.
But the form is, what is that? Is it the sort of, you know, the features of it, which might include lighting?
Is that how you'd like me to leave it then?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can take up in submissions. Thank you. I'd like to look now, please, quickly at the way in which you describe the impacts from the proposal. 3.19, which is on page 17.
Yes.
17. You say there, well, there would be some significant effects on views from parts of the SLA as set out in the Statement of Agreed Matters. The
Oh,
effects,
sorry, I've lost you on the paragraph number. Is this
Sorry,
my inquiry
no,
report?
no, my fault. I was reading the wrong one. Sorry.
Okay.
Proposed development would, this is 3.19, would be visible from various nearby properties and settlements, as well as parts of the surrounding road network and several core paths and cycle routes. However, visibility of all the wind turbines would be frequently restricted beyond the site boundary and within approximately 5 kilometres of the turbines by the setting back of the turbines from the plateau edge. And there you cite a number of illustrations. Now, I don't want to take up your time at this time of day by going through each of these illustrations. Do I understand your position is that by, as you would have it, setting back the turbines in accordance with what we see here, you call that mitigation?
It is one of the mitigating measures, yeah.
Do you accept that while you describe views of the development as being frequently restricted, they're often not frequently restricted, particularly from minor roads, of which there are quite a large number of small unclassified roads in the district?
Well, I think what it's not talking about, when I'm saying frequently restricted, it's talking about within that 5 kilometre offset from the proposed turbines, because, and it's not talking about visibility per se, it's talking about visibility of all the wind turbines, and that comes because of the fact that the turbines are, some of them are set back on the plateau, so you're not going to see all of them from many places within 5 kilometres. And I think in cross-examination from Mr. Finley, we talked about areas of the ZTV within 5 kilometres where there wouldn't be any visibility at all of the turbines, and you have the different colours of the ZTV that indicates different numbers of turbines that would be visible. So I think the comment about is not about it's specifically within that 5 kilometre area.
Yeah, you've used the expression all the wind turbines, and that's you setting the bar at maximum possible visibility, isn't it?
Yeah, because there are locations where you can, you do get visibility of all of them.
Indeed, but there are also locations, many of them, where you get visibility of some or some parts of the turbines.
Yeah, and I think the point that I was making was about the visibility of all of the wind turbines would be frequently restricted within that range because some of them are set back from the plateau edge.
Is visibility mitigated if you only see some of them rather than all of them? Surely not.
Yeah, I think it is because if you were to see, it's a function of the landform sort of characteristics and the fact that it's a relatively sort of flat plateau, and when you're very close to the foots, I suppose the base of the hill of fare from those receptors, you're not seeing all of the development. That's what it's saying in simple language. So there is a mitigation because there were other layouts that were looked at earlier where they were sort of either closer to the edge or more spread out along the hill of fare, where the function of actually trying to push them into the centre of the site, but also looking at the heights of the turbines, generally along the edges of the layout, we've adopted the 180 metres to tip, and it's the taller turbines at 200 metres to tip that are within the centre part of the site. So it's the selection of different heights as well as sort of setting them back that has that effect.
But the best that would achieve, Mr. Ferber, is to limit the amount of each turbine that you would see. So you would be, let me finish, please.
Yeah.
You'd be aware as a viewer, whether on a bike or in a car or walking, you'd be aware of the presence of a wind farm.
You would be, and I think the term...
Sorry, let me finish. It doesn't really matter that you don't see every one of the turbines. If you're seeing a number of turbines in this hypothetical view we're talking about, then you're aware of the presence of the wind farm, are you not?
I think it does make a difference to the magnitude and the effect, because there is a perception, for example, if the scheme was right on the edge of the plateau and you saw all of the turbines on the edge, and your perception would be different, even though the effects might still be significant, because they've reached a threshold of the magnitude of change where the effects would be significant. The fact that you're seeing them, partially seeing some of the turbines, or some of the turbines are screened and they're seen over the hill, that does have an impact. I'm not saying that the effect isn't significant, but it is a relevant mitigation, because mitigation means to reduce effects. It doesn't mean to eliminate.
Yeah.
Mitigation isn't about eliminating visibility. It's about reducing the visibility.
Okay, let me try and help you. Perhaps you're saying, not that I agree with you, but perhaps you're saying that it's a lesser impact.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary.
Well, we can discuss that in closing, but just so that I understand you, thank you. Now, does any part of your assessment here in this part of the report think about the impact on cyclists? And I'll tell you why I asked that question. As it happens, this is a very popular part of the world for cyclists. And of course, they're moving more slowly. And of course, they have a better view, or often have a better view of the countryside. Does any part of your assessment take that perception into account?
Well, I think we've acknowledged, and it's part of the statement of agreed matters with the council.
Sorry, do speak up a little, would you mind?
Sorry, yeah, that it's part of the statement of agreed matters in terms of landscape effects, that there would be significant effects on cyclists. And at 3.32, I outlined that with respect to the Aberdeenshire cycle route.
Well, with respect, you don't, because you only talk about the so-called Aberdeenshire cycle route from Mid-March to Next and part of the core path, although you have set out some numbers there.
Yeah,
But you don't attempt any sort of qualitative assessment of impact on cyclists.
I think the purpose of the of my inquiry report was to review the LVIA and basically to assess whether I agreed or not with some of those conclusions, and then to report on that in a way that was relatively concise. But I think that you'll find that there is a more detailed assessment within the LVIA in terms of impacts on cyclists.
Okay. You perhaps don't know this, but my clients are not party to the statement of agreed matters, and so we don't feel bound by it in any sense.
Okay.
Did you know that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think that the LVIA stands, and there is an assessment in there on impacts on cyclists, and what I'm attempting to do in my inquiry report is to draw attention to those effects that are significant, not to reproduce the whole of the LVIA again, because that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be sort of an appropriate way to sort of assist the decision maker.
All right, well, I understand that. It's 4:15 now. Will you now indicate to me when you want me to stop, please?
I'm fine to go.
Sorry, I'm talking to the reporter.
Are you about to start a long section?
Yes.
Well, I'll stop now then. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, and we're going to resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow.